Good evening and welcome to the Charlton Board of Selectmen's meeting for April 29th, 2014. I would ask that we begin with the pledge to the flag. I'd also ask that we observe a moment of silence for the victims of the tornadoes that have gone through the Midwest in the past day or two. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And as we go through our agenda, the chair respectfully requests that all participants treat each other courteously and be acknowledged by the chair before speaking. Those in attendance are requested to turn off cell phones or to put them on vibrate so as not to disrupt the proceedings. And those wearing hats, please remove them. Thank you. Our agenda for this evening consists of the minutes of the Selectmen's regular meeting of April 15th, which will be followed by community relations, announcements, and open forum. We're going to change up a little bit tonight. After our open forum, we will have the student select persons report, which will be followed by appointments and resignations. We have one resignation from the auxiliary, from an auxiliary patrolman. We have one scheduled appointment at 7 p.m., which is a public hearing for Ye Old Commons live entertainment license. We have 4 items under new business. Discussion of a letter of support for House Bill number 3983, an act relative to workforce reform. Number 2 is a request to declare Tanker 1 a surplus property. Number 3 is award of the highway materials bid. Number 4 is the town administrator evaluation for 2014. We have one item under old business, which is the annual town meeting, where we have listed to discuss both the warrant with motions and the budget. That'll be followed by any committee reports, any Board of Selectmen policy review we have, then the town administrator's report, and other business that will unknown at the time of posting. We will be going into executive session at the end of our regular meeting, and we will come out of executive session solely for the purpose of adjournment. Just a couple of reminders. Our annual town election is on May 3rd, 2014. We strongly encourage everyone to go out and vote. The next regular selectmen's meeting will be on Tuesday, May 13th, 2014. And then we have our annual town meeting on May 19th. We also strongly encourage residents to come out for the town meeting. We do have a few announcements. Town Collector Lucia Blanchette reminds residents that the fourth quarter real estate and personal property taxes are due May 1st. Interest at a rate of 14% per annum will accrue if not paid by the due date. Also, if payments are not made by May 1st, the bills will become subject of a $10 demand notice. Again, annual town elections are Saturday, May 3rd, 2014 at the Heritage School from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. The annual town meeting is Monday, May 19th, 2014 at the Charlton Middle School, and the meeting begins at 7 p.m. And the town is sponsoring a free fishing day, which is Saturday, May 3rd, 2014, from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. at Fay Mountain Farm. This is sponsored by the Town of Charlton Conservation Commission and the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. There's no experience needed, no age restrictions, instructors will be available, and all gear will be provided free. Also, there's no license needed. If anyone has any questions, you can certainly call the Conservation Commission up at the Town Hall. The Boston Post Cane Committee is in search of a new cane recipient. Please visit www.townofcharlton.net for more information. You can also always call the Selectman's office at 248-2206 if you'd like more information as well. Do we have any other announcements?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Walker?
Yeah, just a couple of things. If I could, with the board's indulgence, I'd just like to read a letter that came in to the town from Mr. and Mrs. George Bellarose of 180 Brookfield Road.
Please.
Dear Mr. Swenson, we will soon have a budget review for the town's departments in May. I pray the town gives serious consideration, in particular, for the police and fire departments. These men are on the line every day and need as much help as we can give them. in view of the recent history of the Boston policemen and firemen who died on duty, reinforces the need to keep the men we have and increase where possible. Every time we call the police department for one reason or another, they are always on top of things, doing their job and answering the call. I personally have been stricken with recent illnesses and was in need of the fire department's ambulance more than once in the past year. I must tell you that these men are devoted, professional, and caring. Everyone is needed in their job to accomplish a successful end. Again, I ask that these two departments be considered with great seriousness and deliberation to achieve a positive and fruitful conclusion. God bless these men. Thank you in advance for your attention, George Bellerose. So I wanted to share that letter because it completely, my own beliefs completely mimic what he's saying in that letter. The next thing I just wanted to do was mention Earth Fest. We had a great time last week and last Saturday, even though the rain was terrible, the wind was terrible, and it was freezing. Everybody was laughing all day. The pets were absolutely wonderful. We had our first recycled art contest and had, I don't know, I think there were at least 20 contestants, children and adults. A lot of them got prizes, and they were really wonderful, inventive pieces, works of art that children and adults made out of recycled materials. It was lovely just to look at them. We had a town-wide pickup of the trash all over town. All the yellow bags were dumped in the dumpster out back, and Casella picked them up for us today. Kathy Keel, who kind of oversees and runs everything, especially with any kind of a positive event in this town, I think she gave out about 200 hot dogs. And there was macaroni salad and beans, and everybody got something to eat. It was all free and donated by Millennium, quite a few of it, along with the t-shirts. So in spite of the fact that it was rainy and it was windy and it was cold, everybody had a great time. It was a wonderful event, and next year we're going to definitely make a rain date. So to that end, should I make this
Now would be a fine time.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
One of the groups that, is Officer McGrath here? Okay, if you could come up, Officer McGrath. We wanted to recognize the police explorers because they were there all day long, a whole bunch of young people who's the charge of Officer McGrath, and they were setting up the tents and setting up the common, and they were cleaning up afterwards, sweeping up the floor, putting all the tables back. They just worked all day long, and whenever anybody needed anything, there was one of them right there to help you out. So we wanted to give this certificate of recognition from the Board of Selectmen to the Charlton Police Explorers under the direction of Patrolman Richard M. McGrath. The Charlton Board of Selectmen would like to commend you for a job well done during the 2014 Earth Day festivities. You go above and beyond the call of duty and are always willing to help. Thank you. Presented on this 29th day of April in the year 2014. And everybody has signed this except for me, so I'll do that right now. So, thank you very much.
I don't know if you look at tree lighting or Old Home Day or any event that goes on in this town, the police explorers are usually there helping out. So it's a credit to Officer McGrath and everyone involved in that program. Thank you, Ms. Walker.
Thank you.
Do we have any other announcements? Do you have anyone here for open forum? Chief?
It's through the chair. Also on Earth Day, we had collected the old prescriptions, and the drug take-back, which was, a lot of the communities around did that. And we had our largest pickup of prescription drugs. We had 82.6 pounds of prescription drugs that were brought to the Charlton Police Station. So those drugs are no longer accessible to people that might misuse them. So we delivered them to the DEA. The pickup spot was in Millbury, and we did that. We also, during the Earth Fest, because it was raining, we relocated to do car seats. I mean, we only had 4 that came, but we are going to have another safety seat clinic very soon, and we'll announce when that's going to come up to try and offset because of the bad weather that we had, so make an opportunity for people. But that announcement will be coming soon as Lieutenant Lewandowski sets up the date. I just want to echo what Ms. Walker said about Officer McGrath and the Police Explorers. You know, I had told him about Earth Day, and you know, and he came in, and you know, he had all his people stayed there all day, and rain, you know, and it didn't matter. They helped everybody that was setting up and tearing down. So the day was really facilitated by the Police Explorers, and it's to his credit and also to his wife for those men and women that come and are part of that. So it's a great program, but it's run, even though the police department hosts, it's all their efforts, you know, that make it happen, and nobody else's.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have anyone else here for open forum? Then we will move on. We have, under appointments and resignations, we have 1 resignation as an auxiliary patrolman.
Would you like to start with your student person? Are you gonna move for?
I was going to move her right after the scheduled 7 o'clock scheduled appointment. We already discussed that.
Okay,
So-
sorry, I missed that. All right.
Ms. Craver, would you take us through the resignation, please?
Yes, sir. Attached is a letter from Kevin O'Brien resigning his position as an auxiliary patrolman from the Charlton Police Department. The board should accept his resignation, and a letter thanking him for his time has been completed and is in your sign folder.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? I would enter, Ms.
Thank
Walker?
him. Just to thank Kevin for his work and help.
I would entertain the board's wishes with regards to the resignation. Mr. Singer?
I would move that we accept and send that letter.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? None appearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Actually, we are 15 minutes early for our 7 o'clock appointment. So what we'd like to do is as I mentioned earlier, we're going to move our student select person's report up. She has homework tonight. And we appreciate the fact that she's keeping her priorities straight. So we'll move that up and let her get on with her homework.
Thank you. The second annual district art show will be held this Friday, May 2nd, from 5 to 8 p.m. at Shepherd Hill. This is a great art show. Last year we had a huge turnout, and I expect a lot more this year. Quarter 4 progress grades will be closing this Friday, May 2nd. AP exams will be taking place for the next 2 weeks during school. There will be a mock car crash held at Shepherd Hill on Friday, May 9th. There will be a spring drama production Friday, May 9th and Saturday, May 10th. Math MCAS for grade 10 students will be held in school on May 13th and May 14th. Shepherd Hill's band pop concert will be held on May 13th. And our chorus seniors banquet will be held on May 14th. Tickets will be available at shepherdhillchorus.com. And our very first Broadway spectacular will be held on May 23rd, 2014. Tickets are available for purchase at shepherdhillchorus.com.
Thank you.
What's the name of it?
The Broadway spectacular.
Oh.
There will
it
be
is.
songs and solos from all different musicals like Phantom of the Opera, Wicked,
Oh,
Hairspray.
Wow.
It'll be a great show.
great.
Do you have any other questions for the student select person? I have one. The mock car crash, is that required for all students to attend?
No, that's optional.
It's optional? I hope students would attend that. I think, speaking for every parent here, no matter how responsible your kids are, when prom time comes and they go out, you just sit and hold your breath for about 24 hours solid until you know they're back home again. So I think it's a great activity for the schools to do. Very important thing. Thank you, and good luck with your homework. I see when she said progress reports were coming out, that's why the homework's getting done. What we'll do is we still have a few minutes before our scheduled appointments, so what I would like to do with the board's indulgence is to move to new business, see if we can knock off 1 or 2 items under new business before we get to our 7 o'clock appointment. Not hearing any objections, we will do that. Our first item under new business is a discussion on a letter of support for House Bill number 3983, an act relative to workforce reform. Ms. Craver? We all have to scroll now instead of shuffling papers.
Yes, sir. Town Treasurer Keith Arsenault is recommending that the Board of Selectmen support House Bill number 3983, an act relative to workforce reform by sending a letter of support to Representative Durant and House Speaker Robert DeLeo. These various reforms go a long way in preserving municipal funds for former employees legitimately eligible for unemployment benefits. I would recommend the board send the letter of support as recommended. We would also include our other representatives.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Walker?
I would make a motion that we agree to send this letter as recommended by Mr. Arsenault.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? None appearing, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Number 2, item under new business is request to declare the Fire Department Tanker 1 as surplus property. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a request from Chief Cloutier asking the board to declare Tanker 1 as surplus property. This tanker is 12 years old and is in need of an estimated $50,000 of repairs to keep the truck in working condition. The cost of repair would only extend the life of the vehicle by 1 year. The National Fire Protection Association, along with the International Association of Fire Chiefs, recommends that fire apparatus older than 20 years be replaced. I would agree with the Chief Cloutier and recommend the board declare Tanker 1 as surplus property.
Thank you. And just to be clear, Tanker 1 is 27 years old,
Yes.
as I have stated here,
Correct,
27 years old, with $50,000 in repairs to get it through 1 more year.
And Mr. Chairman,
Ms.
what
Walker.
will we do without Tanker 1?
Chief, would you come up, please?
The Tanker 1 has been out of service for approximately 8 months now. We haven't had it in service since then. We've been getting by with the other tanker that we have, Tanker 2. We utilize that during fires, and obviously we rely a little bit more heavily on mutual aid. It does affect our ISO rating as well, and I don't know exactly what the points are for that, but that tanker was a 3,000-gallon tanker, so the ISO rating will be affected as well. We do need to replace that vehicle. It's a 1987, and it's one of them that's been on the list since 2007 to be replaced, along with Engine 5. We were going to combine Tanker 1 and Engine 5 back in 2007 and replace it with one engine tanker, and we've been pushing that off, you know, every single year. So obviously for the last 7 years we've been trying to get it replaced. It's finally met its demise, and not worth putting money into it at that point anymore.
And through the chair.
Ms. Walker.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. I just, for the residents, can you just explain what the ISO rating is?
Yeah, the ISO rating is a rating that we pay for our house and property insurance. Whenever every single 6 years, we are evaluated by the insurance service organization that will take a look at our ratings, how we rate as a fire department with personnel, staffing, with water supply, vehicles on the road, age of vehicles and everything. And then our insurance in the community is affected by a certain number that the insurance companies look at and they assign it according to a lot of different things. It's quite extensive.
So you pay more in insurance
correct,
depending on your
that's the
rating?
basic bottom line, correct.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Mr. Singer?
Just real quick, so the surplus tanker will be sold?
Yes.
Any idea about what we might expect to get for it?
I would honestly suggest that we put it out on auction. It is the last vehicle that Maxim ever built. To collectors, I guess it's somewhat more of a more valuable piece. I would suggest that we put it out onto the open auction market and see what we can get for it. I do not know, or would even venture to guess what we could get for it. I don't want to lock somebody in or lock somebody out. But I do believe that we could get something decent for the truck.
Ms. Craver, did you have a comment on this?
I did, I just wanted to let you know that later on in the meeting, we're gonna be going through our the motions. And I have a recommendation in here for replacing that vehicle, so.
Thank you.
we
Mr.
will-
Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I move that we declare tanker one as surplus property.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? None appearing, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. And we have time to go through one more before we get to our 7 o'clock hearing. Our next item up under new business is the award of the highway materials bid. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Highway bids were received and opened on April 24th, 2014 at 2 p.m. After review of the bids, Highway Superintendent Foskett is recommending the awards as follows. Item 1, bituminous concrete, type 1, in place at $67 per ton to JSL Asphalt Incorporated from Westfield, Massachusetts. Last year's bid was awarded to Massachusetts Broken Stone Company at $67 per ton. Item 2, full depth pavement reclamation and the application of 1 gallon of liquid calcium chloride per square yard at a cost of $1.58 per square yard to Murray Paving and Reclamation Incorporated, Holliston, Massachusetts. Last year's bid was awarded to Murray Paving and Reclamation at $1.37 per square yard. Item 3 is stone seal at $2.14 square yard, $2.14 a square yard. Double stone seal at $4.05 a square yard. 10% asphalt rubber at $3.14 a square yard to All States Asphalt Incorporated from Sutherland, Mass. Last year's bid was awarded to All States Asphalt Incorporated for stone seal at $2.12 a yard, double stone seal at $4 a square yard, and asphalt rubber surface treatment at $3.10 a square yard. I would agree with Mr. Foskett and recommend the board award the bids as stated.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I move that we award the bids as requested and stated by Mr. Foskett.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? None appearing, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries unanimously. And we are close enough to 7 o'clock that we can scroll back and we will start our 7 o'clock hearing.
Okay, so if you'd like to
Yeah.
wait the 4 minutes to start the actual hearing, I could, I have a couple of things.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, and that way in case someone else is coming. We held an open enrollment today for our staff for the new health insurance company. It was well received, and as you know, the staff will be receiving a reduction in their, health insurance costs. So we've begun to migrate to Hampshire County Health Systems. Also, work will begin shortly on installing the air conditioning in the south wing as voted by the town meeting. And I've also been notified by Charter Business today that they are doing a merger. And it doesn't sound like it's actually a merger, but they'll be doing some swapping of business. And what will be happening, and I think they put out a today. The town of Charlton will become Comcast versus Charter. I have spoken with Tom Cohen to see if we are in negotiations with Charter, to make sure that there's no changes and that wouldn't affect our amendment. And as you know, we have an assertion hearing and there's a comment period. So none of that will be affected, but residents should know that they may start hearing that Charter will become Comcast.
In
And
fact,
it may take about a year.
there was an article in the paper today about it.
Was it? Okay, I didn't see it.
Okay.
Okay, well, those are a couple of things I did want to add on.
And Mr. Chairman,
Ms.
just if
Walker.
I could just add on one small thing. We had a lot of comments on Earth Fest about when we were going to replant the trees on the common. Maybe we could get an update on that. The 2 trees that were taken down, there's a lot of concern about that, and people understood once it was explained to them that the trees were diseased and couldn't remain. So now everybody's asking when the new trees are going to be planted.
And we've had some of those questions also. At this point, the ground is thawing out, so we weren't able to do any work until now. I want to have a discussion with the board. Do you want to replace both trees? I'm thinking that maybe we find one good, I want to say Christmas tree for lighting. And then we're also planning on, in the long-term master plan that we have for this building, we are looking at taking the driveway around the back of the building and coming back out the other side. In that, we will be looking at removing the 2 trees on the side of this building. One of them was a tree in remembrance, and I've been speaking with the family, and they are fine with removing that tree and replacing another one on the common. So I'm thinking that the second tree that we would replace out there would be that tree, and really put some time into putting a nice tree up there.
What I would possibly suggest is that, as this is getting a public forum right now, that we make this as an agenda item for our next meeting, and give any residents that have any thoughts on how they'd like to see the common replanted. You can send an email, make a phone call, drop a note, anything you like, and we'd solicit some feedback from residents as to how we should proceed on replanting the town common.
Great. And if I could just mention, give a plug to the Garden Club. They've done a tremendous amount of work on the common, planted recently, and so any of the flowers or any of the nice stuff, small stuff that you see around there is as gratis of the Charlton Garden Club.
Thank you. Seeing as we are right at 7 o'clock, we filled that time pretty well. We do have one scheduled appointment at 7 o'clock. We will be holding a public hearing on a live entertainment license request from Ye Olde Commons. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a request from Ye Olde Commons, 120 Northside Road, Charlton, Massachusetts, for a live entertainment license. Also attached is information about Ye Olde Commons and what they do. We have scheduled a public hearing for 7 p.m. If you remember, in the past year or so, the police were notified about a rave party taking place at Ye Olde Commons. From this event and others as well, we notified Ye Olde Commons that they were required to have a live entertainment license. The License Review Committee, which included police, fire, building, Board of Health, and our office, reviewed the request and all events that would take place in 2014. Recommendations have been made for your consideration, which we feel meet the needs of the departments and the residents in the area. And those stipulations are as follows. All outside entertainment must end by 11 o'clock p.m. All inside entertainment must end by 1 a.m. All sound levels should be maintained so as not to constitute a disturbance of the peace. Maximum of 1,200 persons on the site at any one time. A maximum of 100 tents on the site. Maximum parking for cars shall not exceed 300 on the property. No on-street parking. If the event disrupts street traffic, establishment must hire police detail. Maintain sufficient bathroom and bathing facilities in accordance with health code requirements. Police details, if needed, will be paid 30 days in advance of the event by certified check or money order. The serving of alcohol beverages would require a separate license issued by the Board of Selectmen. And a crowd control manager as applicable under 521 CMR. Also attached are letters from some of the abutters objecting to this license request. Representatives from Yale Commons will be present to answer any questions the board might have. And the chairman should open the hearing by reading the notice as placed in the paper.
Thank you. And that notice, as published in the papers, is that the Charlton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 29th, 2014, at 7:00 p.m. at the Charlton Town Hall, 37 Main Street, Charlton, Mass. 01507, to act on a request by Harold Henning on behalf of Ye Old Commons LLC, 120 Northside Road, Charlton, Mass., for a live entertainment license. Anyone interested should appear at the date and time specified or submit concerns in writing. And we will declare the meeting open at 7:05. And we do have several letters here, but I think what I would like to do first is we obviously have some people in the audience that would like to speak, and I would like to start to invite people up. If you'd like to come up and speak on either side of this, please raise your hand and be recognized, and you're welcome to come up and speak. Sir? If you'd begin by stating your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Harold Henning. The address is 120 Northside Road, Yale Commons. I'd like to just briefly go over what we do at Yale Commons and what this entertainment license is meant to cover. As you may know, we've been operating since about 2004, and about 2 years ago there was an event held at the Commons, which was unusual for our site. It involved live music that was with an amplified sound system, which is the exception. We've never had that before, and actually haven't had that since. This year there was another request by an organizer to hold a similar event, as well as the organizer from 2 years ago who wanted to hold a smaller event, which he also did last year. But those, I believe, are the primary reasons for this request for this license. In addition, we also hold a Renaissance Festival that has been held for the last 7 or 8 years on one weekend. That, however, has no amplified music of any sort. We discourage any kind of electronic equipment there in order to hold the ambiance. So that's all vocal and instrumental. So the festival, or the rave 2 years ago, caused us quite a bit of agitation as well. It was not expected as to the level of noise that it raised. We do apologize for that, did apologize then, and are very adamant that these rules that have now been put in place in order to control this would avoid any kind of future repeat of that trouble, that noise level. For this year, actually, the organizer of that July event has canceled the event at this point, so actually this year it's going to continue to be as normal and relatively quiet. However, I do want to move ahead with the license requirement, just because in general it covers if there is somebody who wants to play something at a wedding, or the organizer, Jean-Luc, who's coming back for July 4th, for his smaller venue, just covers things like that. So other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions or address any concerns from residents, certainly.
Do you have any? We'll get to everybody. Thank you, sir. We'll get to everybody. Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's my understanding, Mr. Henning, that the event that we have received notices about is not going forth this year.
Yes, there was an event scheduled for July 25th through 27th, which was dance party it was very similar in style to 2 years ago, with the stipulations that I put on the event of these time frames, and organizer canceled the event with the information that he was unable to come up with the funds to have the police coverage that the police chief requested.
Okay, through the chair.
Ms. Walker?
It looks like the police detail is only requested if the street is disturbed. Is that right?
It was not my understanding that that's the case. The police chief did request presence on site at all times of a certain staffing of officers for if there are over 300 people, I believe was the number, right?
Okay, well, the permit I'm looking at says, if event disrupts street traffic, establishment must hire a police detail.
Yes, I heard that in the reading, yes.
Chief,
So, I'm
if I may, through the
confused.
chair, in the discussions with Mr. Henning, we spoke if, we start having like over 250 people for these type of events, where we would phase in officers. We had talked, depending on this event that had been proposed, which is no longer, somewheres of 6 to 8 officers on site, during this event, and it was running close to $8,000 that the person would have to pay up front. There would also have to be fire or EMT, paramedic coverage. So to safeguard that, I just want to. I know there are residents here that want to speak. So I would just say to you this. 2 years ago, we weren't aware of the event. We found about it at the last minute, and it took on a life of its own. But I would just say to you that in dealing, Mr. Henning, since that event, even at that time, to get payment up front, to pay for the police, and our discussions going forward, he doesn't want to have those problems, but he does want to run his business. That was Rockin' M Ranch. I mean, they did have concerts there. This is not different than what has historically happened there. It may be a different style of music, but I think we put some things in place that will insulate, the neighbors from having anything so overwhelming that it's really going to disturb the ultimate tranquility. It's not like that he's going to have things week in, week out as far as rock concerts there. He's not like the Comcast Center. I think he has a right to operate. I think he's been very open to our discussions. I've visited there. The town administrator has come with me, fire chief, building commissioner, board of health. I mean, we're all, trying to work with a local business person. Yes, he did have a bad situation 2 years ago, but I don't think he's wants to. I don't think we should paint him with that, as we're going forward. I think it's a site that, he's had the Renaissance fairs, and a lot of people, aside from the signs, I mean, maybe asking directions or whatever. I mean, before that, you had Nuwala's there, which was, Halloween, the spooky world kind of thing here in Charlton. So it's always had some kind of outdoor entertainment or what have you. So he has a venue that he has, to me, has full right that he should be allowed to run and to have his business flow. Now, if obviously this board issues the license and something serious occurs outside and, he doesn't live up to that, and I believe he's going to, because of all the, our interactions, I don't think he's gonna go back on his word or, try and shortcut anything. But if there were, I mean, when he comes up for his renewal, you don't reissue the entertainment license, plain and simple. But I think he should be accorded the right to at least see how things go forward. And there are a lot of people. I mean, he has for those people that don't know about the facility, what they call live action role playing that goes on there, and there's people that come from all around, and we're not getting calls over there to chase these people out, and we're not. He's got a facility that is a venue for that type of entertainment, and other than the one rave, we're not getting calls over there. And if there has been an issue that a resident has lived with or has had a problem with, I personally haven't got a call on it. But I mean, we can work out if there is some situation like that. We don't want to impact the neighborhood where it's all jammed up with cars, so you can't get through for safety and just public, the peace and tranquility of the area. But I mean, if he's having events during the day like the Renaissance Fair, like any fair, it's like Old Home Day. You got to expect, people coming and going, and there's going to be some moderate amount of traffic. But I think that all the respective boards and departments have looked at it, and we've outlined what needs to be done.
Thank you, Chief. And before we start hearing from the audience, I would just like to acknowledge that the board did receive letters in opposition to the license request. We received letters from Carl and Karen Remian and Wally and Nancy Eastman. We received a letter from Frank DeLitto, Kelly DeLitto, and Carolyn Colby, and we also received letters from Kathleen Godsick and Joseph Godsick. So I just want to acknowledge to those people that your letters have been received and have been reviewed by the board. And we also received a letter from Dan and Sonia Weigel. Then if we got the others one. Yep, thank you. So we do acknowledge those letters have been received and have been given to the board and reviewed by the board. Sir, you wanted to come up and say something?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, come on up, Mr. Singer.
I actually had a question for the chief on one of the things that he said.
Okay, take a seat, Chief. Mr. Henning, if you could let the chief come up for 1 second, please.
Thanks, Chief. I understand there were concerts there in the past, but a weekend-long rave is not the same thing as a concert.
Correct.
You had a conversation with him in which I guess you had mentioned 250 to 300 people you would want to have police detail on site, but that's not listed as a requirement here. So if he were to have this event, we were to grant this license, and he had, 500 people or 800 people and didn't get a police detail, he's technically not in violation of his license, so we would have no cause to reject the license next year because he didn't violate the license. Shouldn't it state right in here as one of the stipulations along all these others that at a certain number of people on site, he'd have to have that? And if that was the case, should it be 300, 400? What should that number of people be as a stipulation that he has to have a police detail on site? I think that should be included in this. So if he does violate that, we'd have cause next year to say, you violated the agreement.
Well, I would just say to you that we talked about if you had, say, 300 people, that you have a minimum of 2 officers, okay, for that. If there was alcohol involved, for some reason they wanted to have that same event and they had a one-day license, then you would need to at least double that if there was, so, but the event that was there, okay, 2 years ago, there was not alcohol involved. Yes, there were some substances used, and that we had some people that were sent to the hospital, but last year, the same individual had a couple hundred people there, and the entertainment stopped at 6 o'clock. There was a couple hundred people. They didn't need police. I mean, there was not a problem. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, as far as like a graduated scale. Go ahead.
Did you finish? Okay. One of the things that we had talked about was trying to be fair across the board. And if we started to put in requirements for population, and then police detail, it would also affect it could affect other licenses. So, your gun club, your others would be have to. The chief is absolutely right. The discussion actually went towards, let's look at what the event is versus trying to find numbers. It made more sense. If they were having a wedding of 300 people, they probably wouldn't need any. But as he said, if they're having a outside festival at night, then that might be a different story. And what the committee decided to do was to recommend to leave that up to the chief when he finds out what the event is and what the hours are. So it does mention that there are police details, so he knows that he needs to contact the chief. So I think that if he doesn't, then I think the chief just comes back and makes the recommendations next year to
But-
tighten it up.
It only says police, as Ms. Walker pointed out, it only says police details,
For payment.
sorry,
For the road.
for
If-
disrupting street traffic.
Right. And,
So if you don't wanna specify a number, there should still at least be some kind of a line in here that's going to direct him or anyone to have to contact the chief of police regarding the expected attendance, and then utilize what the chief says, fine, this, I want you to have 2 detail. For that, I want you to have 10 cops in there. And the chief then will have that flexibility to say, you don't need a detail, or you're going to need this size detail. So it's not going to unfairly impact a rod and gun club or him or anyone else, because the chief will have the flexibility, but he'll be able to do that based on the knowledge of how many people are coming. But if it's not in here, he could have 20,000 people on site, spilling over into the streets, not hire a police detail, and he's not violating his entertainment license. There's gotta be at least some line in here, even if it just says to contact the chief and act for your detail requirements.
through the chair, you know,
Chief.
maybe you put in there, that, the venue shall contact the chief of police, you know, that.
With
the-
estimated crowd
With
size.
estimated crowds and, the types of entertainment, and that the owner and the chief of police shall, come to an agreement as far as the level of, officers needed. I would just say to you that, you know, even like with the Silver Kingdom coming up, you know, I've already talked to that promoter and, you know, told them they're gonna need, because, you know, a couple of officers there, you know, during the day, and, you know, we really don't have any problem there, but, you know, to have a presence, and because, you know, just to make sure to manage the crowd. So I haven't had any resistance from Mr. Henning or people, that he's anticipating using his facility.
But I think,
I
think
know, but-
they're both valid points. I
They're
mean,
valid
it's hard
points,
to
and
put a number on it.
I believe, you know, what, Mr. Singer, but what the committee wants to do is, because you have a lot of different events, so if we drew a line in the sand that said 200, 250, 300, and somebody had an event that would trigger, because you can have really disparate treatment. So if, what's always happened here in town, if there was an event and we were notified of it, you know, we would have a discussion about what that venue needed for police, or did not need for police.
And I think that's more of a valid way to go about it in this case, but I think Mr. Singer makes a fair point that
Yeah.
Having some mechanism to make sure that,
Yeah.
that the event organizers have a conversation with the police
And
department.
I've always tried to not be overzealous in that, and just to say, oh, you're gonna need, you know, to go over the top, you're gonna need more and more and more, you know, so.
Mr. Singer?
I'd like to, well, right off the bat, I'd like to move that we add a 13th stipulation that would read, per the chief, venue shall contact chief of police with estimated crowd size and type of entertainment, and chief will recommend any detail requirement to be met, if any.
If any.
If any.
Per event.
If any. And that way, the chief, you can say you don't need any, you can say you need 10 police officers, but in advance, these places will have to say, I'm having this event, here's what we expect, and you'll have the ability to now say you need this, and we'll have the ability to say you did or you didn't violate your agreements, and then we'll have legs to stand on as well.
And you offer that as a motion, Mr.
Yes.
Singer? Do we have a second to that motion?
Second for discussion.
We have a motion and a second, and the discussion right now is relative to the motion, please. Is there a discussion relative to the motion, Ms. Walker?
Just people.
Chief? And again, I'm going to ask everyone to keep the discussion right now relative to this motion.
Should I have said fire chief too?
Thank you. Amend your motion, that'd be perfect.
I'd like to amend my motion to include police and fire chief.
Okay, do we have any further discussion relative to the motion?
As soon as I saw him walk up, I'm like, I know what
Ms. Walker, do you amend your second?
Yes, I amended. I just wanted to hear from
We're going to
Mr.
hear from this gentleman, but we're going to act on the motion. He didn't offer any discussion relative to this motion, so we'll act on the motion, then I'll have a chance to speak. Mr. Salou?
Excuse me.
We're adding the fire chief, the police chief. I think it's pertinent that we add the building inspector too. He oversees a lot of these events. He's very knowledgeable on this. And might be a good idea to run this by him.
But I think it's crowd control codes. I think that's more under the purview of police and fire, though. Would you agree or not?
And how many people are gonna be in for alcohol and that sort of thing, which does, I believe, fall.
That's still under the chief of police, I believe, and fire.
Any alcohol permit we get is also signed by the building inspector.
By the building inspector. One second, sir.
Not to intrude, but has this been voted on already through just
And,
passing? Okay.
one second.
Sir, yes.
One second. People will speak when they're recognized by the chair. No vote has been taken at this point.
Thank you.
Regarding the rules that have been proposed, the guidelines that have been proposed for the license, it's been moved that we add a 13th rule to the conditions of the license. That's what we're acting on now. We're not voting on the license yet.
That will pass or fail, and then we'll continue discussions on what will happen with the request
Thank you.
after that's been changed.
Do we have any other, Chief, just relative to this motion? Thank you.
Just real quick. With regards to what Mr. Salute just brought up, anytime there's a liquor one-day license request, it passes through all of us. So I don't think you need to write that in there. That's already designed in the one-day license, that we have to inspect the facility and we all sign off based upon whatever areas we have to scrutinize. So the idea, I don't think you have to add that in there. And we haven't had where they've requested a one-day license, but it will protect the town, and we will all inspect the site to see if it meets the criteria and sign off. If there's a problem with one of us, the board will know, and then you won't issue the license.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any other further discussion relative to this motion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Henning? It is relative to this particular motion, not the license in general.
Correct. I just wanted to mention that since there was a couple of comments come up regarding alcohol and crowd control from Curtis Maskis, the crowd control certificate we have acquired as he requested, and alcohol license we're not intending on asking or applying for anything one day or, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Singer?
Yeah, and just for clarification, the 13th requirement or stipulation is simply that regarding police and fire personnel requirements to be on site, and only they can make that determination.
Understood. We have a motion and a second to add a 13th condition. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now, speaking on the general request for the entertainment license, sir, if you'd introduce yourself, state your name and address.
Yes, sir. Mr. Swenson, my name is Steve Ford, and I live at 28 Northside Road. My question to the board and the gentleman trying to get his license is, how many times in the past several years have the policemen called, the fire department, the ambulance? You know, in my opinion, this is a liability for the town. I think you're opening yourselves up for some bad things. What happened this past Sunday on the 27th in the early afternoon with the police and fire department and whoever else was there involved, ambulance? We've had enough. We've had enough on Northside Road with this. And I can only know I speak for several other people on this, on our road. You know, there's needles found all over properties adjoining that property. People in a friend of ours' pool at 2, 3, 4 in the morning that don't belong there from the Old Common. I'm a mile away and I can hear that music.
It's enough, enough, you know? I wish, I'm sure you've heard stories and all that stuff, I wish you people could have been there for some of these so-called 150, 200 people parties. It's not true. The speed limit on the road, I believe, is 25 to 30 miles an hour, and it's not even close. To see these people go by trying to get down there, you know they're drinking and whatever else they're doing before they get there. You know, enough. You know, I don't see this, I can only hope it doesn't go through. I really, really do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Hi, again, if you'd state your name and address, please.
Karen Remian, 99 Northside Road. I wrote one of the letters. I'm actually surprised about the chief being okay with this. I was one of the people that talked to him about it after the rave 2 years ago. I work for a law firm. I know what goes on at these parties. This is a residential street. We have Lucier Builders just purchased a bunch of lots on that street, and he's gonna build up more. We've got people who park at the end of the road just to walk our street, because it's so quiet. Because all you can do is take a right out of our street to get to Route 20. You can no longer take a left. It's a very quiet street. We've got people, my cousin being one of them, who lives right across the street from this place. I believe there's a woman right here who has maybe 2 trees that separate her from the property. And the windows were ready to break that night. It was crazy. And we got this gentleman coming up to our houses saying, "We're sorry." And I'm very surprised that the chief is okay with this, because the police couldn't control it that night. Who's gonna count these cars that go in there? Who's gonna make sure there's just 300 cars, that there's only 100 tents, only 1,200 people? And he's saying he's not going to ask for an alcohol license. They're gonna bring their own, along with all the other drug paraphernalia that we walked through and saw on our street that night. And I just hope the town does not pass this, because somebody's gonna get hurt on that street, I guarantee it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I would, 1 second, sir. Ma'am, 1 second, if you would ask the 2 chiefs to come up again, if they would, please. No, I'm sorry, if we could, Chief, if we could get the 2 chiefs at the table, please.
Yep.
Thank you. A question that was asked, Chief, that I'd like to get some feedback from both of you on, if I could, is public safety issues that have resulted. And I'm looking at the event that occurred a couple of years ago, at least at this point, as a one-time event. I mean, it was a learning lesson for, I believe, Mr. Henning, as well as for the town in general. What I would like to do, just as general, if you could give us some feedback as to what you get for public safety calls or concerns in general from the venue.
The night of the rave a couple of years ago, we transported, that I know of, 4 people from that location. They were folks that were, you could definitely tell that they were in some kind of drug-induced state. Obviously illegal possession and everything else there with that. So those people were transported to the hospital. They did happen at various times of the evening. It was not 4 people all at once, but we did have to transport a couple of people there. As a fire aspect of things, the fire portion of the event that we know of, there was no fire incidents at the location of the night of the rave. Just the folks that we transported to the hospital.
Other than the rave, have there been public safety issues? Either police, fire?
On the fire side and EMS side, nothing more normal than regular events that we would normally go to. It's not like it's a well-known address for us. I mean, we all know the address, but it's not a super well-known address where we know that there's something going on multiple times. We have been asked to supply EMTs there during some events that they have with the, and I'm not sure what groups they are, but we have been asked to go to those events on really, really hot days where the temperatures are exceeding 100 degrees. They've asked us to show up with EMTs just to try to keep people cooled down and hydrated and those kind of things. Just to kind of monitor the crowd and monitor folks' blood pressures and those kind of items. And really, there's been really no fire situations down there, thank God. That building that a lot of the events are held in is a fairly large building. I think it has an occupancy permit over 200 people, and that building is not sprinkled. So the utilization of alcohol in that building is, not authorized through the town. So, and it's not a sprinkled building. Anything that is over 100 people is required to be a sprinkled building if there's alcohol there. So they are violating state law if that's the case, if they do consume alcohol in that building. So that's a concern for us at that point.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Purvey?
Yeah, so, going back to the rave, okay, I was, we found out at the last minute, okay, and we scrambled to get officers there and to maintain them through the night. It wasn't anything that was planned out. There was no, so we just had to make do what we could get by with. And the problem that you had, at that time was there had been acts scheduled, like the last act was going on like 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and they had the way they had the stages set up and everything else. And those are all the things that we talked about that we don't want that happening again, okay? And that's why we had the cutoff time as far as 11 o'clock, as far as anything outside. And like last year, the guy that was the problem, I mean, you wouldn't even, they ended it at 6 o'clock. I mean, we didn't even have a police detail there. So everything was just, we monitored it, and the town administrator and I went out and checked out the site beforehand. I think fire had one EMT there, or paramedic, whatever, for the event. So that person, obviously, we really curtailed, what had happened in the year prior. As far as, if there was drug paraphernalia from that event, I would say absolutely. I mean, they were using bath salts, and they were probably, there could have been other drugs there too, but yeah, we sent people to the hospital. But we're not, like, when he has his, like, Silver Kingdom, and we're not running up there and having a lot of different issues. I mean, to give you, I'd have to go back, but it's not like that we're running up there all the time as he has events. We get calls and say, how do I get there, or what have you. I understand, and I respect all the residents, their concerns, and the idea is I'm not advocating for, for the license, for the fact that, that I just want to see this go in or whatever. And I would just say this, to the chair. Both you and I, are involved in music, okay? And the idea is we're at different venues, and I just, when we're not, except for that one rave, okay, as far as having problems up there. But I remember even prior to me working here, Rockin' M Ranch having, country western, in the afternoon and stuff like that, to what time they went at night. And because of all the changes in the law with regards to the bar in there, they, if they were to ever have a pouring license, they would have to have either they would have to modify the room, or they would have to have fire suppression, and they don't have it. And Mr. Henning, is not looking for that. But if there was an outdoor wedding, and they were going to be outside, and they got a one-day license or something like that. But he's not looking to do that. And so the frequency of us going there, that, you know, as far as, now, if there's other issues as far as people speeding on the street coming to his other events, then, you know, then we need to address that. But there are other places here in town that have events that people, and I would just say to you this respectfully, whether it's people going to soccer games, you know, because they're late to get Johnny or Janie to the field, you know, that we deal with the speeding issue every single day on different streets and depending on what's going on. But if there are problems up there, then we can post people up, you know, when the event's going to occur, and, you know, and conduct traffic enforcement to help slow people down that are going to the events, so.
Okay. Thank you both. Sir, you wanted to come up? If you'd state your name and address, please.
My name is Carl Remian, and I live at 99 Northside Road.
Thank you.
Mr. Henning, when we had the rave several years ago, walked up and down the road, apologized to everybody, assuring us nothing like this would ever happen again. So I'm surprised to see Mr. Henning is negotiating with the same people that put on this rave 2 years ago. Now, it's not going through at the moment, but he has not assured us that this is not going to take place. But let's get, regardless of the rave that happened 2 years ago, the travesty of that, let's look at what we are approving here and where we're approving it. You're approving 300 cars in a residential neighborhood on one lot. You're allowing 1,200 people to this event. We don't know how many events there are. Is it going to be weeknights? Is it going to be every week? Is it going to be every weekend? We're also allowing 100 tents on the property. I don't understand, is this a campground? Do we have campground facilities? Do we have a permit to run a campground? Why do we need 100 tents for these so-called events? Unless people are gonna be bringing their own booze, their own drugs, and be doing this in their tents. Also, it just seems to me, it sounds so innocuous. The man wants to run his business, and I can understand that. And we've had no problems with the way he has been running his business with the EO Commons and the night thing, what they have, the play rolling. That's not a live entertainment license. We're talking about a live entertainment license that lasts until 11 p.m. in a residential area to 1 p.m. indoors. Now, I don't know how the people would feel that live right next door, but I'm sure that they can hear anything that's going on for live entertainment indoors till 1 o'clock in the morning. With 1,200 people on the property, 300 cars and 100 tents, it sounds like a mini Woodstock to me. And it seems totally inappropriate for the town of Charlton in a residential neighborhood in the town of Charlton. I don't see where the town of Charlton benefits from this. And I'd like to ask you, would you allow it on your street? I just think it's totally inappropriate. If he wants to run a business, we're talking about a wedding. Okay, a wedding. Wedding to me is like 120 people, 50 cars. Have a band, get married, things over by 9 o'clock, they're on their way. But we're talking about live entertainment till 11 p.m. They shut down at 11 p.m. God knows what time they leave. And that's the live outdoor entertainment. We're talking indoor entertainment also till 1 p.m. God knows what time they leave. That's not a wedding. That's not just a small get-together. It's not play rolling. We're talking live amplified outdoor music in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It just does not seem appropriate to me. And I hope to God you look out for the residents of Charlton and the residents of this neighborhood, and you do not allow this to happen. It's one thing, have a wedding, 6 o'clock, but till 11 o'clock at night just seems so excessive for 1,200 people in a residential neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm not sure. The question has been asked, Mr. Henning, how large is your facility? How many acres of land is it?
It's 40 acres of land. The question came up what the size of the dining hall is. It's rated for 200 people. Other question came up as to how often, again, and as you pointed out, it is our business runs around providing a venue for the recreational reenactment groups and gamers, live action gamers that come there. That's what our focus is. This music event that we had talked about was is something that is by far the exception, and we have, with the police chief, put the limits on it in order to never have that happen again. What happened 2 years ago? Never. I certainly do understand your concern, and it's the same as my concern. But in answer to your question, no, it's not something that weekends, weekdays, all the time. No, that's not what we're talking about here. This came up because this was a new person actually who applied this year to be an event holder at our site. This one event, and again, this one is not happening this year in any case. So the purpose of moving ahead with this license is to put this all on a solid footing, and I would be quite happy to entertain if you feel that there is a serious issue here with the size that you're hearing.
I just don't understand like 1,200 people. Where do you think 1,200 people are gonna fit with 100 tents and 300 cars on that property and not disrupt the residential neighborhood? How do you get that?
Well,
And who's gonna monitor this? How many employees are you gonna have working this?
the people that are on the site, of course, on site we know exactly how many people are on site. That is checked in, or they're checked in, at least at this event they had a very, very strict check-in. So they knew exactly that there were about 850
And are the people
people.
gonna get to your address? Because the night of the raid, GPS were directing them to my brother's house.
I unfortunately can't do anything about that.
Mr. Chair?
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
I want to get this back on track, please. Thank you for answering the question. My last question, and Mr. Henning, before you go, we'll get to you, ma'am, I haven't forgotten. Zoning on this parcel, is it residentially zoned? Is it zoned for business?
Yes, it's residential agriculture, and the dining hall is grandfathered in because of the business that's run there
That's
for
good.
years. yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Singer?
One thing, and it's actually more of a question, since we had already added one stipulation, possibly there's another one we could add. If people are constantly going to the wrong location, and I can understand why she would want someone going to her house or his house, and GPS, because unless they update satellites, you're gonna get the wrong address. Could a stipulation be for, as well, some kind of requirement for signage that would point, this way? I mean, lawn signs, $4 a sign, you can get a couple signs that just, there's where it is, and here's the entrance, so people come in, they'll see the signs, and they'll know, don't go to her house, or don't go to his house, the signs right here lead you right to the driveway, or the entrance.
The lady in the back, ma'am, if you want to come up, please. Thank you, Mr. Henning. If you'd introduce yourself, please.
I'm Laura Hopkins. I am 114 Northside Road. I'm currently his neighbor. My property, my husband and I, it abuts his. So our backyard is technically right next door to this whole finale. I don't like controversy. It's really hard for me to be up here because I don't like people watching me. I can see his point where he wants to have a business, but I can also see where I purchased a home, paid a lot of money for this home, and I love my house. It's beautiful. I love my landscape. And I love the area, and I love all my neighbors. We all get along. We walk on the streets, we wave, blah, blah, blah. But when the weekend comes, walking is very treacherous on our street. The traffic is phenomenal. I have a dog, and yes, he gets away, he runs away, he's a dog, he'll play. He goes in the neighbor's yard. I have now put up a fence to keep my dog in. But I also have put up this fence because you have the weekend people coming over, and
I'm going to ask that you address the board, please.
I'm sorry, they come over and they go on the property. And yes, our property is very close, so I understand that they can cross over. The thing is that I run into, though, is the night of the rave, and everybody's so upset about this rave, and then it happened the following year, is not only the amount of people, the noise, but when I woke up, I was woken several times by people banging on my door, asking me for the bathroom, using language that was absolutely atrocious. People were extremely intoxicated, and I know people are saying that there was no alcohol at the party. The last 2 years, there was. I had picked up garbage bags of trash, of beer cans. I actually made a profit of $70 in cans and bottles from them, which thank you, but it was not necessary that I had to actually clean up my property over and over again. And then another thing is I was woken to people in my swimming pool, not 1 or 2, but at least 10. I'm in the medical field, so for me to see people in my pool that are intoxicated has now brought my attention to my homeowner's insurance liability. If someone drowns in my pool, I'm going to be sued. I asked them how they got into the pool, and none of them could even talk to me enough to acknowledge the process of how they got into the pool. I am well gated. I don't understand it. So they climbed over a gate, and one of them actually splurted out. They couldn't figure out how to open it, so they just took their clothes off and jumped in. If that was your home, how would you feel? I have young children. I had a mother-in-law that I was tending to on oxygen, and I have now people running around my yard, screaming, and then I had people pulling into my yard thinking that it was their street, leaving their car, and my driveway is very narrow. You can only get in one way with one car. What if the ambulance had to come to pick up my mother-in-law because she stopped breathing? She was sick. She recently passed. Everything is a nuisance. I'm sorry to say this, but I mean, and this gentleman, he runs a wonderful business on the weekends. It gets a little rowdy sometimes. I bite my tongue because I don't want to be the neighbor that's mean. But enough is enough. Can you please think about this? I don't like knowing that my children who are 18 and 16 now, can see that the town, who is supposed to be drug-free and very admissive to, bad behavior, you're allowing it. I don't understand why you would give a license to someone and say, yes, it's okay to use drugs. It's okay for you guys to give women or men ecstasy, have them raped. And if you looked on Facebook, or if you pull up rave from 2012 from Charlton and read some of the postings, you guys might be actually appalled at some of the stuff that was written. I was so upset last year about this that I actually physically went over there 3 times and asked them to turn the music down. I had his number on a postcard, on a little sticky note. I talked to him 3 different times. Please stop. You guys said it got over at 6. It did not. It did not. My windows rattled. Earplugs in my ears did not stop this. My Jeep, I don't have doors on or top on because it was in the summer. I had 2 people sleeping in my vehicle. I don't want this behavior. It's not necessary. And I just want the town of Charlton to be a happy place. I love this town. I love the neighborhood. I love this. But I don't want the rave. I don't want us to be known as Charlton, the rave, Charlton, the great place to go get drugs. It's not necessary. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Do we have anyone else that would like to be recognized or come up and speak? And we're coming up on an hour now, so I'd ask if anyone has any new information that hasn't been discussed already. Is there anyone else who'd like to come up? None appearing. Is there any other questions or comments from the board? None? Ms. Walker?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to get a better understanding of what legal authority this board has at this point to make changes here or not make changes. I'm not clear on that.
I think, as with all the other licenses we approve, we're the licensing authority. It's our decision to approve every license in this town as we do every year, be it a car license, a liquor license, a pouring license, or an entertainment license.
And
We are
so
the
if,
licensing authority.
right, I understand that, but if we were to disapprove a license and it would cause somebody to go out of business, is that something that, that's within our purview? That's what I don't know.
Yeah, I understand that. All I can do is state that this board is the licensing authority in town. For better or for worse, for good or bad, we are the licensing authority. It is our decision. Mr. Salou?
Mr. Chair, we've heard a lot about the rave that was here 2 years ago, and I happened to be with the chief that night, and it was a bad night. I don't think any of us were prepared for what that was, and I don't even know if the owner was prepared for what was coming down his way. I think it was admirable of him to go around to the neighborhood, to you guys. You know, he didn't have to trying to be a good neighbor and apologizing. That's what good neighbors do. You try to work together as neighbors. I think that once that rave took place, us as the town were adamant that it wasn't gonna take place in our town again. That sort of venue. Now, other venues that may take place in town, country western venues, you know, rock and roll venues, it's great. I'd like to see venues come into our town. Give people things to do here. There's not a lot for people to do in town. That particular event, again, was horrible. We haven't allowed it again. I don't believe in that manner. And if any of those people come to try to do something in this, the police presence is made very clear here, and by the $8,000 detail that was gonna be charged for a deal like that, they're not gonna, I don't believe there's a promoter that would come in and wanna do that here for that. So, again, it was a bad thing that happened a few years ago. I haven't heard of anything else horribly bad. I understand what you're saying, yes, and it was a bad thing. But if we can all maybe work together a little bit, and see if we can come up with some solutions to this.
Good. Mr. Singer?
Just a few things I'd like to point out, I guess in particular to Ms. Walker, the residents, Mr. Henning. First, for me anyway, that one rave was the first and only one and only issue I've ever heard of regarding the commons. I didn't hear about or even know about the event until after, and I haven't heard of any issues with the establishment since then and before tonight. That's the first thing. As far as Ms. Walker's question or comment, we are the licensing authority, but as long as the businesses within Charlton are operating within the boundaries established by the town, we would be, I think, remiss saying, oh, you follow all the rules, we're going to deny you your license anyway. We have to take that into account. But we have heard the residents as well. As Mr. Salou just pointed out, there was an $8,000 requirement for a detail, which caused that person who was running that rave to not come back. However, this license is not just for raves. If it was, I would probably vote no on it, but it isn't. It also would allow him to have a wedding. I don't know of any weddings that end at 9 o'clock at night. Any wedding I've been to has gone to 11 or 12, at least. And if he wants to have a live band at a wedding, he can't have that either because we denied the license. If he wants to have a private party with a live band for one evening, he can't do that either because we've denied the license. The license is more encompassing, but we've tried to take your considerations and also your happiness, I think, into account here by adding in new rules, new stipulations, including one we've just added tonight, purposely to give this board the ability to say, you're never going to get a license for anything again in this town if you violate these. So Mr. Henning now has to decide if he wants to try and go to the chief of police and say, I want to have an event like this again. How much do I have to spend? How many officers are you going to have me to have on site? If he violates it, we now have the ability as the board to say, Now you've broken the rules we've set for your establishment. You don't come back here for a license again. So it's a big risk he takes as well with these new stipulations. So I think we've tried our best to craft something here that will be a win-win, allow his operation to continue within certain guidelines, give the Board of Selectmen the teeth we need if they violate to say this will not happen again, any event, and at the same time to try and protect the residents of the town who live on that area. I don't want our town to be known as a drug town or anything else, and I don't think anyone else here does. I love this town. I hope that you guys can live in peace, and I'm hoping that these stipulations that are put in place, I mean, frankly, I hope they prevent a rave from ever occurring again. What I heard was the horror story, but again, I've only heard it one time, and he runs his business year-round, and I have not heard about it since, and I'm hoping that this will prevent that from ever happening again.
Thank you. I'm sorry, the lady in the, woman in the back, you want to come up? Yes, ma'am. If you come up, please, and then the gentleman. You can introduce yourself, please.
My name is Jody Petro, 28 Northside Road. I had heard Chief say earlier that he's not gotten any other calls about any police or EMS. Sunday, there was 2 Charlton cops. EMS escorted somebody to a hospital, obviously. Don't know what that was about, but this is what we deal with on the weekends. Even, yeah, there may not be the raves, but you allow 1,200 people on that property. What makes you think it's not gonna turn into something that's out of control? And the rest of the residents have to put up with it. I mean, we constantly have to deal with EMS running up and down the road. Just on a quiet weekend. You know, we get to the point, on the weekends, we stay in our houses. We don't even walk on the roads because of the speeding. It's awful. It really is. And to think that we moved to the neighborhood, Northside Road, because it was quiet, nice quiet area, and we can't even go out of our houses on the weekends. That's not fair to the residents at all. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Singer?
You may not believe me, but I do understand your concerns. But police and fire get called out all over town, not just Northside Road. I don't live anywhere near there yet. I still have police and fire trucks going up in ambulances up and down my street. People speeding down the roads past my house so much that when they hit a pothole in our house on the road, we heard what we thought would be their axle breaking. I mean, so those are things that none of us want to deal with, but it's not just limited to one street in town. And as far as these events happening, one of the stipulations put in there is that he would have to go to the chief for any of those events and say beforehand, I'm gonna have this event and I'm gonna have this many people. What are you gonna tell me I have to do? And then the chief will be able to tell him, you're gonna have this many police on site before your event. This is going to be the cost. The minute that's violated, he has now lost the ability to get any license, in my opinion, from this town for anything ever again, because now he's in violation of his license.
Sir, gentleman in the back, you wanted to come up again?
Yeah, I just,
No,
we keep talking about.
no, have a seat if you would, please.
We keep going back to the rave, and I think that's where we're misguided here. We know it was a bad event. We're all together on that. We all agree on that. I'm asking you to look at what you're about to approve in front of you right now. 1,200 people. We're not talking about a wedding. We're talking about an outdoor concert, amplified music in a residential neighborhood. If you want to keep the guy, I'm not advocating putting the man out of business. What he's doing is fine, it's quiet, it's on the weekends. What he's applying for is something totally different. We're talking about 1,200 people, an outdoor concert, amplified music until 11 p.m. That has nothing to do with a rave. It can be a rock concert, it could be country music, it could be electronic music, it doesn't matter what music it is. I don't think it's appropriate to have amplified music in a residential neighborhood till 11 o'clock outdoors and then 1 o'clock indoors. That's what I'm getting at. It has nothing to do with the rave 2 years ago. It's what we're approving now. and going forward. If he wants to have weddings, we don't need to approve 1,200 people and 300 cars, and you still haven't addressed the 100 tents. It's not a campsite over there. I don't know where these people are gonna bathe and shower unless they're gonna go into the women's swimming pool next door. If you wanna have something, I think it's reasonable to have something with lesser amounts of people and lesser hours. I think what you're approving here is way too large for the neighborhood. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, we're past to Mr. Salou.
Mr. Chair, just back to that zoning issue question. I looked at this property years ago. I do believe that the zoning is for this commercial venue over there. I believe that is, I think if you check your zoning, I think when the previous owners had it, the zoning was changed to allow business because they were putting weddings on and things like that there. So I'm pretty sure that that zoning is allowed over there. It's not residential zoning.
Chief,
Thank you.
Mr. Cons-
One second, Chief Cloutier?
please follow up on.
I just checked with our zoning enforcement agent, and it's a pre-existing non-conforming. So what that means is that the tents, the building that was there is pre-existing. It's allowed, like Mr. Henning stated, it's basically kind of grandfathered in. So it is pre-existing, non-conforming, even though it's in a residential neighborhood, so.
Thank you.
Just so
Thank
you
you,
have
Chief.
that.
Ms. Walker?
So, Mr. Chair, that's exactly my concern, because certainly one neighbor suggested I wouldn't want this in my neighborhood. I certainly wouldn't. There's no question what you describe is enormously difficult. However, if the law of the town allows this business to continue there, and you'd have to go to town meeting to get that changed, to get the zoning changed on this property. There's no way that we can say, he can't have these events. I mean, we don't have that right, as far as I can see, even if we wanted to. So, so that's where my concern is at this point, is what, I don't see how we have any right to make changes other than to develop what has already been developed, which are by both the chiefs and the building inspector and this office, rules and regulations that conform with that. So I don't know what choice we have in all this,
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to offer a thought, if I may. I've been listening to everyone else. I'm going to offer a thought for a minute, if I could. And I will admit to being very conflicted on this issue. I am involved in the music business. I make a living selling sound equipment to people to amplify music. I'm also a musician who does that on the side. So, and also being an independent business owner, I appreciate the ability of someone trying to make a living at their own business. I'm very sensitive to all of that. My other concern, and this is going to address more my thoughts on your concern, Ms. Walker, is that this was residential, but it was exempted. It was grandfathered in as pre-existing non-conforming. And my concern with that is that it was grandfathered in as it was functioning at the time it was grandfathered. And my concern is that what this license would allow is taking it beyond what the uses it was grandfathered for. So I have concerns of that as well. I do believe that this could have, and for all parties, I'm really trying to keep the rave as a separate incident. I want to take that as has been said on at this table and from the audience as well. That was an anomaly. We learned a lesson there. I think we have what's been addressed here and what we've all learned since then is sufficient to keep that from happening again. But that being said, I have some real concerns myself if the types of events that would be allowed under this license go beyond the scope of what was being allowed when the property was grandfathered in for that type of business. So I have real issues on both sides, to be honest. Ms. Walker?
Thank you. Well, to that end, then, Mr. Chairman, I would like to suggest that we close this hearing at this time and continue it to the next meeting until we can get some, your point is valid. I mean, it depends on what was grandfathered in specifically, and we need to find that out. And so I'd like to continue the hearing.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
what was grandfathered in was the zoning, not the events. So there'd be no reason to continue this to find out about zoning unless we're going to try and get the zoning changed, which we can't do. Town meeting has to do that. So no matter what anyone in the audience today feels, no matter how I feel about raves, the bottom line is no one in this room or in this town, I think, would be happy with anyone at any level of government telling them you haven't broken any of our laws or any of our rules, but we're going to punish you anyway. What we've done here tonight is try to put into place now some rules that can be broken, so we then can say, now you've broken the rules, now we can punish you for it, to protect the residents. But until someone breaks the laws and breaks the rules, it's wrong to punish them for it, for doing nothing wrong. You know, even though it's wrong, there was no rules, no laws in place that were broken. We're trying to fix that. If we want to change zoning, that can't be done here. Then that's an issue to go to town meeting. But it's not something that would cause us to continue our meeting, since we have no authority as a board to change the zoning.
It's true.
That's a great, that, 1 second, sir, I will recognize you. That's a valid point. We're going to bring this hearing to a close in just a minute. I would just offer a different opinion on that. You're right. It's not fair to punish someone who hasn't broken any laws. I completely agree with that. The other side of that argument for me is that I'm concerned, and we can't change zoning. Obviously, we can't change zoning, but my concern is that I don't know that I can look at this, and again, trying to look at both sides of the issue, I don't know that I can look at this as punishment. I mean, this is a business that has been operating with the Renaissance-type fairs, the live role-play games, those types of things, for a number of years, had events before when it was Rockingham Ranch, and I'm not sure that I go back far enough to remember what it was before Rockingham Ranch. So the argument could be made, I believe, that without this license, Yale Commons would still be allowed to conduct, raves excluded, the types of events that they've historically conducted on that site. So I don't know that I consider that punishment. I think it's a valid point, but I don't know that I can personally consider it valid. Mr. Singer, quickly, if you would.
If you were to have role-playing, live-action role-playing, if he has 600 role players, and some people start playing flutes or something, you now have a large crowd of live music. I mean, then he'd be in violation for not having a live entertainment. Even someone playing the flute live to 300 people would put him in violation without this permit. And the point is, none of us want that. Okay, none of us do. But if the shoe is on the other foot, and you hadn't broken any rules, you hadn't broken any laws, and someone came to you and says, you can't do this anymore, you would be like, what are you talking about? I've done nothing. I have not broken anything, any rules. I've broken no laws. I've followed all the rules. So that to me trumps everything. So if you don't do this, you know, he doesn't have a live entertainment license, and then it's a complaint, he's got 400 role players playing acoustic guitars, he's in violation. So no matter what, he needs to have a permit. It's designed, hopefully, to give the chiefs of police and fire the teeth they need to protect those residents, to prevent those things from happening, while giving him the ability to run his business, have a wedding, have a private party, and do that kind of stuff. Now, if the residents want to see a zoning change to residential only to exclude that business from being able to operate, then they need to go down the town meeting road and get an article on that warrant and seek to have the zoning changed. All we can do as a board is try and put rules into place to help you that can be violated, but unless rules are broken, we really aren't in a position, in my mind, to tell people no when they've done nothing wrong. And if we were to put someone out of business because having a couple hundred people with flutes would be a violation, then we would be hurting someone for doing nothing wrong.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that we make final comments, and please, new information. Chief, then Ms. Walker, then, sir, you'll have a chance.
One issue that was brought up was about, was about the trash, regardless of what the event is. If for some reason this venue causes any excess trash for the abutter or for the roadway area, I think it's the responsibility of Yale Commons to take care of that if that trash is being introduced because of whatever he has there. You know, saying whether it's popcorn bags or what have you. So I just think, that's not written in there, but maybe there's something that should be written in as far as the trash. As far as the levels, okay, that were stipulated, it was looked at the footprint and what was the maximum that property could have. If this body, and you want to talk with the owner on that, I mean, if you want to modify those levels, but it was just looked at, geographically, and they were figuring, how many cars they could park, and if people were to tent, how much they could tent on the property, and that would be like maximized. So if you continue this, I don't know what you're going to do tonight, but if you do continue it, if there's any discussions as far as modifications. The reason for the 11 o'clock was the different venues that I've been to, and yourself, usually are 11 o'clock. That gives enough time for everybody to exit out. If for some reason, and the inside venues, anywheres in the town, the bar rooms and what have you, it's 1 o'clock. It's not less than that. We're not. I know that the gentleman that wanted to have this entertainment that wasn't, that's not going to happen, wanted to go till 2 o'clock in the morning, and we, said that's not going to happen by any way, shape, or form. Even I don't care how many police officers, and we were saying as far as cutting off at 11.
Mr. Chair?
I guess the thing that, I guess it's a trust issue right now as far as, I don't think that Mr. Henning is going to be Comcast Center week in and week out. I think he's going to be doing his live action role playing and the Silver Kingdom and those type of events. And if there is something of a concert nature, it's going to be more the exception. And I know the residents feel that once the license goes and it's set there, that who's to say that he's not going to go against, maximize that every single weekend. So I know it's a trust issue, and I don't want the residents to feel that I want their neighborhood disrupted or what have you, and that they move there because of the nature of it. You talk about the signage. That area is, in particular, has the antique signs and that for that village. And the only thing that I would say to you, if you're going to ask him about signage, directing them into the event, what they do, like at a lot of places, they just post it the day of, and then they take it down. So it would be, they would with arrows to the event. So I don't think you want to have permanent signage, Yale Commons this way. I think it would be event signage.
Thank you, Chief. 1 second, Mr. Singh.
Don't go away.
One second. 1 second. Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope we're going to limit this because.
We are, believe me, we're going to limit this.
I guess, my understanding at this point is that this board has no authority to not allow the entertainment to go ahead. That the residents, in my opinion, have an opportunity here right now to talk to Mr. Hemmings. He seems to be a little bit softened up. And I think you could probably, with the chief's help, get together and all of you talk about what you'd feel the most comfortable. If that is not in the cards for any of you, then go ahead and try to get the zoning changed through town meeting, through the planning board, through whatever the way you would have to get zoning changed. It's a big deal, it'll take a long time, but it may be something that you want to do. So, but I don't think this board has any, I think putting something into effect, as Mr. Singer said, something, there hasn't been anything in effect up until now, so we haven't had anything to push against. This is something that at least we can say, well, we agreed to this permit and you've violated it. And so we can go against, the owner in that respect if he does violate it. But I would take advantage of this opportunity right now to try to work something out with him, and with the chief, if you can.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Mrs. Singer, last comment from the board, please.
I'd like to move, well, it's not a comment, Rob.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make another amendment. I'd like to move to add another stipulation, a 14th stipulation to the license request, and that would be for temporary signage, already lawn signs. Chief, and that's why I alluded to lawn signs. They're cheap, like $4 a piece. You stick them in the ground, you pull them out when it's
Yeah,
done.
temporary.
That might also help with people going to people's houses and driveways by mistake. Simply a 14 stipulation that would say venue must put out temporary signage the day of, during events, directing attendees.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and just so everyone is clear, this is not a motion or second to approve or deny the license. It's a motion to require another stipulation that would require temporary lawn signs on dates of events. Is there discussion relative to the motion? Mr. Salou?
Mr. Chair, I believe that we should probably look at our sign bylaw before we, I know it gets pretty restrictive with these.
Temporary signs.
I believe in
Okay.
temporary signs, that's not a
Okay.
concern. I think we're
Right.
good, I think we're good with that,
If
They come up and down the day of.
No matter what it is.
for each event.
It's just a lawn sign, you stick it in, take it out. So if there's a party, stick in a lawn sign, people know there's an event there. When the event's over, take the sign out of the ground. You're gonna
Mr.
have,
Chair, it's no different than what the Masonic Home does. They put
Exactly,
event,
exactly. Yeah.
if it says event, there's an arrow, and then they take it down when it's done.
Is there more discussion relative to the motion? None appearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, that motion carries. All right, we're gonna wrap up this hearing. What I'm gonna do,
I have one possible more, Mr. Chair, but I need you and the chief for this.
go ahead.
You're both in the audio business. So I notice it says, all sound levels should be maintained so as not to constitute a disturbance of the peace. I know I was, first of all, one of the people most vocal against a noise bylaw in this town, and for good reason. If you have a Sweet 16 for your kid, you can get in trouble. That's one thing. This is a business establishment, and it doesn't constitute what a decibel level should be or what maintaining a decibel level should be. And you two, knowing this, I think would be in a position to know, is there an acceptable range that Mr. Henning can conduct his business, they can have their live music that would also limit its travel or keep its level? Is there a range that could be acceptable to everyone during that time period?
Okay, it all depends on, the distance, from the
The
amplification.
farther you go away, the lower.
Right, and so different venues have put things in. They've put trees in, they've put barriers in. The one big thing that we talked with Mr. Henning was to face the stage, okay, if there's live entertainment, to face it towards, basically northeast, like towards the turnpike. So that way, it's not facing the residents, to try and maximize the direction of the sound going out that way.
Okay. Mr. Chair, my last request then would be to add a 15th stipulation, and that would be that any of those amplified live music venues are set up facing exactly that way, so he can have his live music, but it's directed away from the residences.
Wait to be recognized, please, sir.
I thought it was
Wait to be
toward the Mass
recognized.
Pike.
We have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on that motion? None appearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. What we're gonna do, thank you, and I agree with a lot of what the chief said. My word answer to your question is no, but there are ways it can be controlled.
Right.
And I think this will give us a way to do that. What I'm gonna do is, give me a sec. What I'm gonna do is that we've gone well over an hour now. I'm gonna give Mr. Henning one last chance to make some comments, and I would ask those in the audience to have one person come up and make some closing comments. So you decide amongst yourselves who you want that to be, and we'll do that. Mr. Henning?
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the information also that I've heard from the residents. Closing comments, I guess I
Could you
wanted
ask them to
address the
speak
question.
outside?
If there, excuse me one second, Mr. Henning. If there's going to be conversation in the room, please take it outside. Thank you. Mr. Henning?
I just wanted to address the question of the number again of attendees. I believe, as was stated, that number of attendees was calculated based on size, and it is the total number of attendees over a weekend that attend the Silver Kingdom Renaissance Festival, so not at one time. So that's why that number came up, 1,200. It is not our intention to have any kind of single event where people stay overnight more than like 300. If that is something that is of concern, and that is something that you want to put in as a stipulation in this license, and that addresses some of the concerns that you have, then certainly I'd be open for that. As I said before, this license is at this point an attempt to try and cover a lot of different bases which were not really covered before. So just wanted to say that. Last statement, I heard some surprising stories of behavior that might come from people at our site. If that is the case, I urge you strongly, please, to bring it to my attention, to our attention. Whether it's somebody in your yard,
I'm going to ask again, address the
Garbage.
board, please.
Well, speeding, I don't know, but we have very good relationships with the groups that rent from us. Most of the groups are less than 100 people. We have almost nobody that's over 150. They come regularly. They come 6 times a year. We know them personally. And if there is any issue, I will take it up with each one of them and let them know, and they will let their members know if there is an issue, and we'll take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henning. And again, I'd ask, sir, you're going to speak for the last comments for the group?
Absolutely.
I understand that you're concerned about the legal aspects here. You do not want to put a man out of business, and the zoning is already in place. I understand all that. But you do have parameters in front of you that somebody drew up. And evidently, you can draw up different parameters and make something more reasonable if you're not comfortable with denying the license outright. And all respect to you, Ms. Walker, once the license is approved, we have no bargaining power with the man. He's going to be able to do anything he wants. We're not going to be in any position to negotiate with him. I would really like you to strongly consider, if you're going to pass the entertainment license, pass something that's maybe a little bit more reasonable, not the amount of people. If he needs 1,200 people for his Renaissance Fair, maybe we can do a 1-weekend exemption. But as far as concerts with 1,200 people there on a weekly basis, and frankly, what's going to stop him from doing it on a daily basis once this is approved, there is no legal recourse. So if you're concerned about your legal aspects, maybe you should concern with the citizens a little bit too. And if you want to approve something more along the lines of what he's doing in his business now, which is, like he says, 150 people come, well-behaved, no problems. When you open it up to 1,200 people and have 100 tents on the property and people staying overnight, you're opening up to a different can of worms. I'm just saying, if you can limit the quantities to 1,200 or whatever it is, I would think you could be able to reduce what you have in front of you and make it a more reasonable approach if you really feel a need to approve this license.
Thank you. Ms. Craven?
I just want to remind the board that this is an annual license, and that this license would terminate December 31st at the end of the year. And as people have said, and I don't know where you're gonna go with this, but as people have said, you know, the chiefs had said it, I would encourage, and I hear Mr. Henning also encourage, if there's problems, if there's disturbances, call the police, get them on record. Those calls will come back to the board when they start to look at the license again.
Thank you.
Question,
Ms.
point of
Walker, then Mr.
clarification.
Singer.
Have we ever done a license for this facility before?
I'm not aware of any.
Because we usually do our licenses at the beginning of the year, and it's not on there. So this is the first time thing.
I'm not sure that I agree with that. I believe they're in our regular licenses renewals every year. It's
I
for
don't think
business
so.
For business
For
license.
business, but
For
not
business
For
license.
business.
for live entertainment.
Yeah, the live entertainment portion of this is new, but they do have a business license which we renew every year. And when those licenses come up, we've never had, the rave obviously being pretty public, but we've never had comments addressed.
So based on what I've heard, I'd like to make a motion that we not take any action on this license at this time, and that if there's no license in effect, then maybe the rules can be changed before a license gets put into effect, or maybe there'll be no license put into effect, I don't know.
As a rule of order, we have to close the hearing before we can entertain.
Okay, I make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Is there any discussion relative to the motion to close the hearing? Not appearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries unanimously. The meeting is closed at 8:30. Ms. Walker?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we do not take any action on this license tonight.
Is there a second? With no second, the motion can't go forward.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I'd like to point out the reason that I personally didn't offer a second is that if we don't take any action on this license tonight, then the now 15 stipulations that would have to be followed would not have to be followed.
Right.
So there would be less protections than there are already for the residents. So that's one reason I did not second that.
And through the chair,
Ms. Walker?
I agree with you, Mr. Singer, that this is better than what's there now, which is nothing. But there seems to be so much resistance by the residents to even having this, that that's why I suggested holding off on it. If it were me, I would go along with this, but it's not me.
A couple of concerns that I have, if I may. And I appreciate, I want to say right up front, I appreciate Mr. Henning. He appears to be very cooperative in wanting to work with the neighbors and find something that works for all parties. And as much as any resident that's been here tonight, I love this town. I've lived on a quiet street. I get out and walk my neighborhood, so believe me, I can't even begin to imagine not being able to do that in my own neighborhood. A couple of concerns I have are a maximum of 1,200 people. And Mr. Henning, I completely understand you said that's been the total for a weekend. It's never that at one point. But if that's allowed up to there, I'm not a math major. As I tell people, I went to music school, so I only have to count to 4. But that math works in this point. That comes up to, at 40 acres, with 1,200 people, that's 30 people per acre with tents and everything else that would go on. That in my mind, and then parking on top of that on that same 40 acres, that's fairly congested. I think there's something that can be worked out here, and some of the things I'm thinking of are something put in place that's acceptable to the one who abuts the property, to keep people off of her property and control trash going onto her property. I personally would like to see that number of 1,200 people at any one time. I'd like to see that revisited. So I think there's something that can be worked out here. What I would like to propose, with the indulgence of the board and the audience, is I would like to see if we could get a representative or two from the neighborhood, a representative, Mr. Henning and maybe someone else, if you want, the town administrator, the 2 chiefs, and maybe a member of this board to sit down and see if we can agree on some numbers and address some of these issues to address the neighbors' concern. Again, as an owner of a small business, I sincerely appreciate your desire to run a profitable business. Living in a small, fortunately, a cul-de-sac neighborhood where I live, I absolutely appreciate the concern of the residents to have a quality of life. So that would be my thought, and I'd entertain the board's thoughts on that type of thing, on that moving forward. Chief?
I would also like to see us move that number down from the 1,200 down to a lower number, being that the occupancy permit for the large building is 200. Emergency sheltering would be something I would have a concern with. If we had a large tornado or even a thunderstorm or something, a lightning of that nature come through, where would we put all these folks in a quick order? So I'm sure that, I think that 1,200 is a little, I think we could work with that number to make it a little bit smaller. So that would be my suggestion.
Do you have a
Thank you,
number,
Chief.
Chief?
I think, well, obviously, the occupancy permit of that building is 200 people. If they have other buildings on the property that have occupancies of 4 or 10 or 15 or 70, I'm not really too sure. So maybe we take the total amount of occupancy spaces that is legally allowed in the buildings to be sheltered all at one time, and make that the number itself.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Chair, is it possible to approve a license with a blank under where it says maximum of, and have that blank be filled in later based upon the determined occupancy of all the cabins and buildings on his premises?
Boy, I think if Attorney Cosgrove were here right now, he'd be, my hunch would be probably not. That would be my hunch. Ms. Graver?
The occupant has said the number 800 as his regular number for some of the, what is it, the blue?
No, the 800 was the rave.
Okay.
Our regular numbers are under 200. For the Renaissance Festival, at any one time during the day, I would guess, I mean, people leave and go in and out, probably 400 at most.
Is
So I would
400,
be, I mean, we can cut the 1,200 in half, and that's fine.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I would like to move that we change line 4 to, let's even say 700 people.
That's it.
Give an extra 100.
I think he's right.
go with the 6?
Cut it in half. Make it 6.
Do you want to amend that to be 6, or you want to keep it at 600?
Number 4 to
Number
600.
Number 4 to 600. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion relative to that motion. None appearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
And if I could make a comment, if, with number 2, all inside entertainment must end by 1. If it's going till 1, and number 3 says all sound levels should be maintained so as not to constitute a disturbance of the peace, if it's leaving the property and disturbing the neighbors, they should call the police, and the police should go down and be the one to tell them to quiet it down, even until 1 o'clock.
That's a fair point.
The
And as-
neighbors shouldn't have to.
As some of you in the audience may or may not know, last year at town meeting, we brought up a noise ordinance. And there were residents that asked to have a noise ordinance put in place due to loud neighbors and that type of thing. We tried to come up with something that was agreeable to all parties. We came up with something, town meeting overwhelmingly rejected it. That being said, one thing that did come out of that is that the police department does have tools under the ordinance of disturbing the peace. That you don't, again, as the town administrator just stated, if inside entertainment is allowed up until 1 a.m., and that entertainment is loud enough that it's disturbing your peace, there is a route you can take. You can call the police department, and that can be addressed. And I'm confident, with our police department that it would be addressed. So I don't want you sitting there thinking that it's too loud, I have to close my windows, I have to wear earplugs, there's nothing I can do. That's not the case. We do have disturbing the peace laws in this town that can and will be enforced should they get to that point.
And there's a certain amount that cannot leave the property, and we're actually facing that ourselves with the library chiller.
Yeah.
So, they would be held to the same standards that we are.
So, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
whether it was 1,200 before or 600 now, we now have 15 rules/stipulations in place where there were none. All designed to prevent that from happening again, all designed to help us try to protect those residents and their quality of life, as well as give the board power in the future to take action if necessary. And I think it's just come down to hopefully what will be a win-win. But the bottom line is, whether it's 600 or 1,200, the venue has to notify the chiefs of police and fire so that we will never be caught off guard again for any events. And the minute we are, then the venue's in violation. So we have now 15 rules set that I believe and I hope, and these are very difficult decisions, but I think we've come up with 15, we've added 3 more tonight, rules to allow him to continue to operate while protecting the residents of West Side Road.
So you would have, if, Mr. Chairman, if you approve this tonight, you would have 8 months to monitor, have the residents monitor, and come back to have a conversation whether or not there needed to be more limits.
I'm going to recognize the lady in the
Okay.
back first, then you, sir, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Like I said before, I don't want to be the mean neighbor, but instead of doing it for 8 months, because we have a feeling that you guys are going to approve this, because he hasn't broken any laws supposedly yet, even though there was the raids, so-called birthday parties, so-called other parties, and he does have a business on the property. Instead of doing it for 8 months, could we see how he does for like maybe 3 months instead of postponing it for 8 months? Due to the fact that, what if something does come up in the 8 months and it's, or just say 3 months, and everything is fine in D&D, we're all getting along, and we sit down and we talk to our neighbors and we agree on a certain thing. What if we just, how many rules are there now, 15? Or
15.
whatever they are?
15.
What if we come up and compromise more on the rules? Because it seems like all of us are ganging up on him, and we understand that it's because we're trying to protect our neighborhood and we want it to be stay beautiful. We want our value of our houses to stay good. So why can't we just ask for, have him get a special permit only for just a limited time, and then let us also work with him with other things instead of having 600 people plus parking and driving and stuff like that? Because if he has these events, who's gonna be monitoring the drinking? Because people, there will be police, granted, but is someone going to be checking IDs? And then if they can stay there till 1 o'clock in the morning and it has to be, they have to leave, and there's liquor, now I'm worried about drinking and driving on our narrow road.
As far as the liquor is concerned, anytime liquor is served, this board requires that there be what's called a tip certified pour, which is a program that a person has to go through if they want to be able to pour alcohol for sale. That part of that process is that person is required to check IDs. That person and the person who employs them, i.e. the facility, is legally responsible for that. If there's one violation of a person being served alcohol, either when they're underage or when they shouldn't be due to levels of intoxication, that gives us immediate authority to withdraw, to take away all licenses.
And another thing that I just want to address on this is, his property abuts the gas line in the Mid-State Trail. During the so-called episode that everyone's appalled to, there were people that were crossing the Mid-State Trail. I have no idea where they were parking. So who is actually going to be taking a head count to make sure that they don't overdo the amount of people that are there? Someone can go in there and count the cars, but who's gonna take into consideration who's coming in from different areas of that property? Like, they were coming in off the Mass Pike, they were dropping them off and leaving. So who's gonna monitor that situation? That's what I'm concerned about. So, I mean, maybe we can work with our neighbor and keep it a happy area still.
The reason that it's 8 months is that the town licenses run a calendar year. Licenses are renewed each December for the following calendar year. With these stipulations that have been put in here, if any of those stipulations, well, let me put it this way, this board has the authority at any time to revoke any license in this town, for good reason. So if in that interim, that first initial period, any of these 15 conditions are violated, we absolutely have the authority to terminate that license. That being said, if this is granted, there's nothing saying that when this license comes up for renewal in December, that residents can't come back and ask for further modifications on the license.
I know there's a lot of bitterness that's in the air, in over this permit and stuff, and this licensing, I should say. The thing is, with it being so sour tasting in everyone's mouth, do you think that maybe, you know, if, you know, the police are gonna be called a lot more, and there's going to be a lot more, need for other people, you know, how can I say this?
Mr. Chairman, point of
I
information.
want to let her finish, please.
I know, I have a,
One second,
I
let her
don't, I'm
finish,
not
then
sure
I'll-
what we're doing is legal.
So, I don't even know how to place this in words, other than, I know there's a lot of bitterness going on. So, having a feeling that people are gonna be calling the police more often, is that now going to have more traffic? And are we able to, you know, I'm gonna just retract what I don't know how to place this, so I'm gonna retract it, sorry.
That's fine, thank you. Ms. Walker?
Yes, we have closed the public hearing. I'm confused about what we're doing right now.
This is
This
discussion
is
on the
going-
motion to allow the license.
Okay, so even though we've had the public hearing, we can, because we're going on the second hour now.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up.
And I don't mind continuing this, and I think there's enough information and enough concern and enough stuff that we don't even know that it should be continued, because there's room for compromise here on everybody's part, but it's gonna take more time than and it really doesn't need to be done in this kind of a
Well,
venue.
one thing I want to ask Mr. Henning is, when is the first potential event where this license would come into play? Do you have anything booked that this license would be required for, or potentially booked?
There's a event on the weekend of July 4th, 4th and 5th.
4th and 5th.
That would be the first one. And the second is the Renaissance Festival in August.
And my understanding is the Renaissance Festival isn't a concern, hasn't been an issue.
I'm not, personally, I just simply am not sure what the
Okay.
entertainment license is now required for, as Mr. Singer pointed out, since it's brought out.
Oh, where is,
I'm
where's
gonna-
where's- where's Frank?
there's confusion about what you call entertainment. Entertainment doesn't mean that it has to be an instrument. Entertainment can be a mind. And entertainment is entertainment, so it's a broad, you know.
I really think we need to continue this.
Renaissance Fair, even if there wasn't a concert.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I don't think there's a reason to continue this. In fact, I don't even think there's cause to continue this. I think that continuing this just makes all the residents have to come back, makes Mr. Henning have to come back to continue what? You know, if we,
Mine's fine for now.
there's, to me, there's absolutely no reason to continue this other than not wanting to make a decision. Decisions aren't always easy. This certainly is not one of them. But, as I've said, if the person hasn't broken any rules, why are we going to push to continue to not grant their license? We've added 15 rules here specifically to protect the residents. If any of them are violated at any time, we can revoke his license immediately. And then we can revisit this if things aren't working out and make changes as necessary or not grant it again.
Thank you. Sir, this is going to be the last comment.
It
Come up to the table, please.
Yes, sir. And it seems to me that Mr. Singer's already made his mind up for the majority about not having a vote tonight or passing it on. And it is.
I have made up my mind. I don't see there's I don't see
You're
any
making
cause.
your opinion for, I don't know, 20 people? Why don't you ask us?
I've heard every one of you, but, as I said, every decision we have to make as selectmen isn't easy. But as selectmen, we also can't just say, you know what, I know that this upsets people, and By doing so, I'm basically going to be, well, myself, maybe breaking all the rules and punishing someone for not breaking rules because some people want me to do that. And to me, it simply boils down to, we have two sides here. One side is not happy particularly about a particular specific event that happened, and they don't want it to happen
It
again.
goes far and beyond just that one event, sir.
That's-
If,
and-
if
but
you
I'm-
were living
Okay,
on that road.
But to me, that's the only event I am aware of, the only event I've ever been made aware of
Come on.
before tonight. No one's told me anything other than that rave before this evening.
You've never heard about the police calls, the fire department, the ambulances up
To
and down
your
the
comment,
road?
no, I have not. I have been told about one event that happened up there that was a concern, and that was the rave. Tonight I've heard more, and specifically,
Yeah.
because of your concerns, we have put in 15 rules.
Yeah, we
3 I
have to do
personally
this.
added
I
tonight.
believe there's room
Do you
for a
wanna do that
lot
last?
more. This is why I'm asking not for you to push this through tonight, for a
Okay.
vote to yay these guys and just push us on the backside.
Okay, so, but I think what you don't understand here is that if we do nothing, there's no rules for him to violate. If he suddenly has someone come in and says, I wanna have an event next week or in 2 weeks, none of these rules apply.
So calling the police because there's a noise complaint,
Well, he could have 1,500 people. There'd be nothing to stop that. He could come in here and he could have 400 cars on the property. There would be nothing to stop
Mr.
that.
Singer, I'm pretty sure that you're well aware they're not singing Kumbaya down there.
I'm also well aware that I wouldn't want someone coming to me and saying, you didn't break any rules, but we're gonna punish you anyway. So what we've specifically done here, and I'm sorry you don't realize that, but what we've specifically done here is put in 15 rules specifically to protect those residents. So the minute one of these rules is violated, we can revoke that permit, that license,
And like I
and not
said
issue another
previous,
one.
when I first addressed the board, I hope this doesn't hurt the town.
Thank you. I'm going to
Thank
call
you.
the comments there. I'd entertain a motion from the board if anyone cares to make one.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the license with all of the amendments and changes to it, the 13th, 14th, and 15th rules, and with number 4 being changed to 600, cutting the amount of people allowed on the premises in half.
We have a motion. Is there a second? And I'm going to call one more time if anyone wants to make a second. If there's no second, then the motion doesn't go forward. I don't usually do this as chair, but I'm going to offer a second motion, if I could, for the board to discuss. I would move that the changes to the conditions that Mr. Singer specified be added to this, to the recommendations. I would move that this be put onto our agenda in 2 weeks. The reason for that being, I would ask that we get 2 representatives from the residents, Mr. Henning and another representative of his, if we could, police and fire, and a member of this board, which I will volunteer for, to sit down and address some of the issues that aren't addressed on this, such as trash, traffic control, and the like.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Singer?
2 of the selectmen who are here tonight that were opposed to the original motion, I don't believe will be selectmen when we meet again. I would request, even though they are not going to be members of this board, that they attend that. Obviously, they have concerns as well, and as residents of the town, and any resident, I think, has the right to be heard and to contribute. I would like to, I can't tell them to, but I would like to request that they also come and participate in that discussion.
Point made. Thank you. It's again a good point. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Well, I would ask one thing. Are there 2 residents that would volunteer to sit down? You have one? Thank you. Thank you very much. If, Ms. Craver, if you could, if you get the information, and we'll work on that. And I would volunteer from this board unless any other member would like to be on this. And Mr. Henning, you're welcome would ask that you come as well, and if you want to bring a second representative, you could as well, and we'll sit down and just see if we can massage some of the finer points or find something agreeable.
To clarify, was that in 2 weeks then?
In 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tonight, our next regular scheduled meeting.
Right.
And our goal is to meet before then, to work these out and take a vote at the next meeting. and we can work with the town administrator to find a date and time that's agreeable for you.
So we need to vote in that
So
motion.
now we have a motion and a second. Is any further discussion? None appearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries unanimously. So just to be clear, those in the audience, we have 2 volunteers, we'll have two residents from the North Side Road area, Mr. Henning and one other person from his business, if he chooses to bring another, myself, the town administrator, and the police and fire chiefs, and sit down and see if we can address some of the other issues that have been brought up tonight. We appreciate your input, we appreciate your desire to keep your quality of life. We appreciate Mr. Henning's ability to, desire to just to run a business. So I'm hoping we can find something that, at least on an interim basis, is acceptable, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Thank you all for coming tonight, and we're gonna move on. All right. As the hour is getting late, yeah, we're gonna go for that. We have one item remaining under new business, which is the town administrator evaluation. And for those watching at home and those here, we try to yearly give the town administrator an evaluation. We have 7 different categories where we rank the town administrator's performance. Those categories are board relations, personnel, financial management, general management, community relations, interdepartmental relations, and completion of the current fiscal year's goals and objectives. And the rating system is on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being unsatisfactory, 2 being needs improvement, 3 being satisfactory or acceptable, 4 being strong performance, 5 being excellent, highly commendable. How this process works is that each member of the Board of Selectmen is asked to evaluate, give a numerical rating on each of those categories for the performance of the town administrator. At that point, they're submitted to the chair, and with the Selectman's office, we tabulate those and correlate those numbers. Each member of the board is also encouraged or given the ability to comment on each of those categories and as to a reason why the scores that were given were given.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Ms. Walker?
According to this procedure, we're supposed to receive a self-evaluation report. I don't remember that. The second week in April.
That was not, originally, the process was going to be September. I asked the chairman whether or not he wanted to put out the performance evaluation before 2 members of the board left. He said to put it out, and no, I have not put that together.
Okay.
And the reason I did that is I felt it was more fair and accurate to have board members that have served the full time do an evaluation than new people coming in without any experience.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Salou?
As I have in the past, I recluse myself from the administrator's report. My wife is a direct employee of this town, and it would sway either way. Public opinion could be either way I swayed, so I recluse myself from this administrator's report.
Thank you for putting that,
evaluation, I should
thank
say.
you for putting that out.
And Mr. Chairman,
Ms.
in
Walker.
response to Mr. Salou's recusing himself from this, I disagree strongly in his action on this part. I think he owes it to the town and to the town administrator to evaluate the town administrator. She's the highest paid position in the town, and I think I've voiced my disagreement with this in the past, and I just want to voice it again.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you. Mr. Singer?
Since they both have, I will publicly say I agree with Ms. Walker, and my feelings with her is 100% agreement.
Thank you. What I will do at this point is that I will go through each category and give the rankings and give a summary and the average of where that stands. The first category is board relations, and the scores are myself, 4, Mr. Singer, 4, Mr. Zafirovich, 4, Ms. Walker, 1. As far as personnel issues go, myself was a 4, Mr. Singer a 4, Mr. Zafirovich a 3, Ms. Walker a 2. On financial management, myself a 5, Mr. Singer a 5, Mrs. Zafirovich a 4, Ms. Walker a 2. General Management, myself a 5, Mr. Singer a 4, Mrs. Zafirovich a 4, Ms. Walker a 2. Community Relations, myself a 5, Mr. Singer a 4, Mrs. Zafirovich a 5, Ms. Walker a 2. Interdepartmental Relations, myself a 4, Mr. Singer a 4, Mrs. Zafirovich a 4, Ms. Walker a 1. As far as completion of current fiscal year Board of Selectmen's goals and objectives, myself a 5, Mr. Singer a 4, Mr. Zafirovich a 3, Ms. Walker a 1. The category totals are for Board Relations, out of a possible 20, Board Relations 13, Personnel 13, Financial Management 16, General Management 15, Community Relations 16, Interdepartmental Relations 13, completion of current fiscal year's Board of Selectmen's goals and objectives are a 13. That averaged out to a 3.5, which is between satisfactory, acceptable, and strong performance. As far as comments go from the board, I would invite any board member to make comments before I make mine.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I will simply state that in the past, I don't think I've ever given Ms. Craver all 4s and a 5 before. I don't think I've ever given her a 5. I think I've given her 4s, 3s. I may have given her the occasional 2, I'm not really sure. They've always been, again, it's just my opinion, everyone has their own, but fair reviews. I looked at it this time and I saw across the board for all the other areas we had to grade her on, a great effort on her part to try and improve relations, just across the board with the departments, the heads, employees, and the community itself. So I gave her all those 4s. And the 5 I gave her this past year, I think over all else. We've had tough years with tight budgets in the past. This year, more so than ever before. And I think that she has just worked extremely well with the Board of Selectmen, FinCom, and department heads in managing within those constraints that are tighter than they've ever been to help get this town to where it needs to be and to continue to offer the services we provide to our residents. And I just think this year, above all else, has been maybe her best year yet as the administrator.
Thank you. Ms. Walker, would you like a chance to read any of your comments?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My comments are quite extensive and basically 2 pages, and so I'm not going to read them. But anybody that is interested in them, they are available in the Selectman's office, and I would email them to the newspapers if they wanted them. I don't think it'd be to anybody's great benefit to read them all out loud at this point. But I will say, I've given Mrs. Craver all 2s and 1s, which needs improvement and not satisfactory. And I've been particularly direct, and some might say harsh, in my evaluation of Mrs. Craver this year. I think if I were to have stayed on the board, this is my last meeting, I would have been more lenient. In the past, I've held myself back, hoping that I could create some change. However, since this is not the case, I believe my opinions, what they're worth, need to be surfaced. In addition to what I've written on the evaluation, and on a more positive note, I believe Ms. Craver to be quite intelligent and hardworking. I can see where those qualities are useful to this board, especially with regard to the finances. I would hope that the board would understand that this board represents all the aspects of town government, not just the finances. We have a finance committee, and their sole responsibility is to review and recommend with regard to the financial viability of this town. For this board, finances are only one aspect of their job. That's the extent of what I want to say, but I'm willing to share the rest of the comments with anybody who wants them.
Thank you, and I'm going to offer my comments.
Mr. Chairman, I request when this is over, I'd like a copy of everyone's comments.
They're here, they'll be in the file. We do this and I'm going to be candid in saying my opinion on this process has always been is this is a personnel issue, that this should be done in executive session, but the state doesn't necessarily agree with that, so we do this in open session, so all comments will be part of the public record.
So can we all get
Everyone can have
comments?
everyone else's comments.
Will they be copied and put in our boxes?
That if it's at the request of the board, that can certainly be done.
Yeah, I would like to see them
Okay.
all.
I think that as chairman, I'm kind of in a unique position, is that I work with Ms. Craver on a daily basis. We usually speak several times over the course of a day on different things. And my experience has been that she's had a very solid and professional relationship with the board. Anything that I've asked her, anything that I've seen at these meetings where people have asked information, that it's been provided in a timely manner. Generally, I can't think of times I've had to go back and ask a second time. As far as relationships to personnel and interdepartmental relationships, those are both fairly similar to me in their scope. And while I think it's certainly improved, I think one thing that we're facing, and as I've talked to people around town hall, has reinforced that, is due to the financial constraints that we've been putting employees under, morale is an issue. We're asking, department heads are asking all employees to do more with less. That's never a fun situation to be put in. So those are the two categories that I ranked as a 4, as much as anything else, because I believe that those are categories, and morale and the way that this team works together in town hall is something that always needs to be watched and always needs to be to strive for improvement. As far as financial management goes, the budget that is presented at town meeting is brought forth by the Finance Committee, brought to the Board of Selectmen for our approval, then brought to the town meeting floor for the town's vote. That budget, in its initial stages, is developed by the town administrator in conjunction with this board, but primarily with the Finance Committee. And the fact that we have brought balanced budgets to the town meeting floor every year, and there are those that would make the argument taking money out of stabilization isn't truly balancing the budget. And that's a fair argument, but I will state that we've brought a balanced budget to that town floor meeting floor every year in the 8 years that I've been on this board, and I believe in the 8 years Ms. Craver, or 7 or 8 years as Ms. Craver's and FinCom have brought the budgets forward. That has been done without a single person losing their job in these very tough financial times. There have been restrictions, there have been reductions, there has been loss of jobs through attrition, but no person employed by this town has been laid off in that time frame. And in fact, during that time frame, our bond rating has increased. I think that speaks volumes. As far as goals and objectives go, I think one thing that this board has discussed in our goals and objectives workshop before is that we need to make sure, and I'm not casting aspersions on this or making statements, I just think we need to be sure going forward that we delineate between what are the responsibilities of this board with regards to our goals and objectives, and what are the goals and objectives assigned to the town administrator. I just think we need to be clear on this. And my summary is, as chair, I work with a daily basis. I've already said that. I found Ms. Craver to be a pleasure to work with. Her skills as a TA, combined with her professionalism and commitment to the town, have proven time and again to be a very positive asset to the town. As far as negative scores on the evaluation, my concern when I went through all of these is that I think that's more a reflection of this board than it is of the town administrator. The town administrator reports directly to this board. It is our job to manage her. If she's performing any portion of her job in an unsatisfactory manner, I believe it's the responsibility of every member of this board to bring that forward and address it during the year. And I'll leave it at that. So our overall rating is a 3.5, which is satisfactory to strong performance. All comments and scores will be part of the public record if anyone would like to get more information from there. Ms. Craver, I'd just like to, on behalf of the board, thank you for all your work on behalf of the town. Mr. Singer?
Just a comment. You mentioned the negative scores. Just really, I'll throw my opinion out there, and that is that every selectman has the right to score what they believe is right. whether that be a 1 or a 5. And I don't think, I agree, I mean, it's upon us to deal with the temperature as the year goes on with any issues, but in the end, every selectman has the right to score as they see fit, regardless of what that score may be.
No question, which is why those scores were given, every score was given the same, counted in the mix the same way, and it's credible. So again, I would just say to Ms. Craver, thank you, and we'll move forward from there. Thank you for your work on behalf of the town. We're gonna move on. Our next agenda item is, speaking of the annual town meeting, we move on to our old business, which is the annual town meeting with the warrant, motions, and the budget. Ms. Craver?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Singer?
Quick question for you and Ms. Craver. Did Mr. Safarovich ask us to hold this?
He
thought he
did
wanted to be
express
present.
concerns about wanting to be here for this. He said that if you were looking at the motions for the housekeeping things, that he would like to be a part of the discussions of the more substantial pieces. So it would be up to your pleasure of how you'd like to move forward.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Singer?
If possible, I know that we've always done this in the past for selectmen who've made requests that things be held that were important to them to participate in. If it's possible for us to do that and to hold this so that we can have the full board and the selectmen who made the request to hold it, I mean, I'd like to honor that selectman's request as we have for everyone, if we can do that.
That's a fair point. The only point that I will bring up to that is that neither Ms. Walker nor Mr. Salou would have opportunity beyond that unless they wanted to come participate as residents. So I'd ask their opinions and thoughts on that.
Well, there's just a few things on, I don't have the warrant in front of me. But,
It actually is in your box. If you go to your folder,
Yeah, it's on your iPad. If you
Dropbox?
wanna pull it out there.
your Dropbox,
I don't have a Dropbox.
draft budget, scan
Scan
draft.
Was it,
warrant,
was it
429?
emailed to me?
No, it would be on
It's in
your Dropbox.
1 hour
Scan
ago.
draft warrant for
I
BOS.
don't,
That's-
I don't go to the Dropbox,
I
I
don't
just,
either.
I've got it up, Mr. Chair. Do you have the Dropbox window on your screen?
Go, Kathleen, if you go right here on the top bar, you'll see Dropbox, contents.
I don't think I have Dropbox. I don't know, maybe I do.
No, you don't,
She doesn't have it, she's got her own.
oh, you have your own, oh, you don't have the town iPad, I'm sorry, you have your own.
You have a copy here?
Can we,
Yes, sir.
we'll get one right up for you.
She's got one for you.
That would help. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, you don't have the paper.
It's loading up now. There you go.
Okay. So there were, Mr. Chairman, there were some decisions made at the last meeting that I was not at. I believe it was an executive session. Are they reflected in this,
I'm waiting for mine to open as well. There is, while Mr. Salou, Ms. Walker, while you're here, there is one article that I would like to address. And as soon as I find it,
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the article, the executive session that Ms. Walker's referring to, I don't think that was put in here, was it?
the items that were taken up at that meeting.
Ms. Craver, the items that we were discussing in executive session last time, have those made it into the warrant?
I'm not sure which
I didn't think
items
they
you're
had.
talking, I don't think,
Well, there was talk about, well, I can't talk about it because it was an executive session,
yes, that would be true.
so I can't even tell you.
But I think I know what she's referring to.
I mean, you guys were all there, so you should know what I'm talking about.
And
Right.
as far as I know, I don't believe it made it in.
No, it's not there. You are meeting, the board is meeting next Tuesday to have discussions regarding, if you're talking about the classification plan, the Board of Selectmen will be meeting
That stuff.
next
here.
week for on the classification plan with staff. And there may be
Okay.
And
changes
we'll-
or
Yeah,
or
without
whatever, so-
going in violation
At
of,
this
of executive session, I have had a lot of discussion with people in town hall, both union and non-union, regarding the classification plan, and I'd like us in a workshop setting to be able to discuss that.
Okay, can I ask then, now I'll just ask a few questions.
Sure.
The chiller is in here for $30,000 to come out of stabilization, the library chiller. I thought we were getting a grant for that.
We haven't been notified. I mean, I've been told that we are, but I haven't seen the paperwork yet.
Okay, so the Fay Mountain Farm roof was another one that was,
Again, I think
But
that's the
that's-
same situation. We
but
haven't
that's
received
not
formal
in here?
notification.
What page is this on for the chiller?
10.
So,
So I guess what
Okay.
I had asked way back was that both articles for the chiller and the roof be put on here in case we didn't get the grant.
okay, so we leave it here. Will we know
It is
before
here.
town meeting if they get the
Town,
grant?
Fay Mountain Farm is in here.
Fay Mountain Farm is not here.
It's not here.
No.
That's
I
what my
actually
concern is.
changed that, again, as you know, when I do these motions, this is draft. And generally, when I give you they have colors, which some have red, which means those are just being placeholders. I have been told that you will be getting the Fay Mountain Farm. And
Well-
if that doesn't show up, then it will return back there if the board so chooses. At this point, you have not gone through any of the motions. And I started to take the library chiller off because I received a phone call from A&F that you were receiving those, but I have been waiting for the paperwork and the
What-
so-called announcement.
Yeah, what
But
I
I
would,
didn't want to get in front of them.
for the sake of keeping things neat and clean, what I would ask, and I hadn't noticed that on Fay Mountain, I would ask that if we can keep those in
Yeah.
until we get formal announcement that the grants have been awarded.
I'd
to put
appreciate
money
that,
in hand
so
first.
as long as we keep both of them in,
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
yep, I'm in agreement. I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah. Don't spend it till you got it.
Don't spend it too.
This is a work in progress.
Exactly.
Ms. Walker, was there another one?
I'm just I don't think so, I'm just,
So what action would you ask? Do we need any action tonight?
You could go through the housekeeping ones that, 1 through 8. I could go through and talk to you about
I don't have any
the
problems with any of
motions,
those.
but, you could give me direction, but not vote on the final ones. It's up to you.
Mrs. Singer?
Quite often you,
Yeah.
just to finish my thought, quite often you will go through the motions, give me more direction, and then come back at your next meeting and actually finalize certain ones. The finance committee will be meeting tomorrow night, and whatever, it would be helpful if you had a conversation about it, and maybe for, selectmen's, for Joe's sake, you don't actually take the motion. But, I know we have 2 finance committee, the chairman of the finance committee is here also. and
I'm all set
whatever
with this, Mr.
information
Chairman.
you can do,
Thank you, Ms.
would
Walker.
go back to them.
I would ask if we could taking a page from the chairman of the finance committee's rule book, I would ask if we could get a motion regarding the first 8 articles, which are the housekeeping articles.
Sure, I move that we approve the first 8.
Second.
Support the first 8? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? None appearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So all we have left is the rest. We could, if it's the board's desire, to see what we get for feedback from FinCom after their meeting tomorrow night, and then take action on these at our workshop meeting next Wednesday.
It's fine with me.
Is that agreeable to all members?
Okay.
Mr. Morrow, that would be acceptable for your board as well?
What time is
Thank
the workshop meeting?
Would be at 6:30, I believe. Ms. Graves, is that posted for
We
6:30?
have 6:30, and staff will be coming to talk about the classification plan.
So we'll be doing that
I'm
first then.
Imagining 6 o'clock, from 6 to 6:30, you have executive session.
So the open meeting will begin at 6:30.
Okay, but
Executive session
but the
at-
election is this Saturday, right?
The election, is
It
it this
is.
Saturday? It's this Saturday.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
right, so I won't be there, so that's fine with me, though.
Thank you.
It could snow.
Mr. Salih, you good
I'm
with
fine
this?
that, absolutely.
All right, thank you. Then we're set with this for now. No action further we need to take until we meet next week. Ms. Graver?
Can I just take a minute and look and see if I need any
Please,
direction?
please, if you need anything from us.
I would like to tell you about the Capitol
Okay?
and just get any direction, feelings, thoughts you have now before I go
That's,
to the finance
What
Page
committee.
page is
10?
that?
Page
Back to
10?
10?
Thank you.
9 and 10. So what I've done is break this down into two motions. One is for capital articles out of stabilization, and we'll add the Fay Mountain Farm back. And the total amount right now, what I have in there is $269,000. If you look at motion 2, the board has talked about a debt exclusion for the large apparatus. What I have recommended here, and I'm holding as a draft, is 2 fire apparatus. One would be to replace and combine the T1, tanker 1, and engine 5 for $321,000, and replace the ladder truck for $1,049,760. They would both be based on a debt exclusion. And I just want to get a sense from you if I'm heading in the right direction when I talk with the finance committee, if that's not.
I believe.
Through the chair, I just,
Hold on, Ms. Walker?
I feel very strongly that this is exactly the right way to go with the debt exclusion. It's an opportunity we have. The cost of money is relatively cheap right now, and we're not nearly up to our limit, so I think that would be much preferable to than anything else we could do. What else could we do?
Thank you, Mr. Salou, then Mr. Singer.
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering if it would be easier to roll, instead of taking out a stabilization, to roll both these into a debt exclusion.
That is.
That is, the
second
two
motion is
fire
debt
trucks.
exclusion?
Yeah,
The
but
two
no,
fire
he's
trucks
saying,
But you're talking about
first part.
taking the 269 out of stabilization, correct?
in
Yes.
other
Correct.
words, roll them
Okay,
all
so
into
I'm
a debt
saying roll them right
exclusion.
into the 1.38
yeah.
million and the 269 combined to a 1.5.
The reason that I did not recommend that is because you do need some capital, I believe, and a debt exclusion, with the large fire apparatus on that debt exclusion, if it doesn't pass, then you don't have any new cruisers,
Right,
you
yeah.
don't, so that's why I'm recommending to split it this way.
Mr. Singer?
I was just gonna point out that I agree with Ms. Walker again.
There you,
Sure, yep.
Wow.
boy, we're going out with a flower shot.
I'm on a roll here.
Thank you. So, I guess the direction of the board would be that we support the way that you're going with these, with
Okay.
this,
Yep.
with this article.
Pending, you know,
Pending,
further conversation.
yep, exactly.
If you back up one, Article 50, there's also 2 motions under that, and that is the stabilization fund. One of the motion is first motion is our regular motion that we do for the Millennium Fund, which goes into stabilization, $80,000.
Yep.
The second motion has been something the board has talked about, but it's not been out on TV, so I'd kind of like to put that out so people are aware of it now. As you know, we have met with, what,
Oh, yeah.
Can I just ask, are you available Friday the 9th at 1 PM at the fire station?
Yes,
that's for the meeting on the EO Commons?
Right.
Yes.
Because all these people are out of town and everything, we said, so
What's
that
the
way it's
time?
before the next
1 p.m.
selectmen's
Yeah.
meeting. So we,
Would you-
because town hall closes at noon.
Yep.
So we could be, Chuck's, meeting his.
that meeting room. That's fine. Would you send me an email to that
All right.
effect?
What's the
Thank you,
date, Chief, again?
The
Ninth.
9th at 1 PM.
So, a couple of us went to take a look at a piece of property, that
Is this
is.
something that can wait for Mr. Safarovich or no?
No, I don't
I
think this
will-
isn't a big deal. I think this is
It's not a big
fine.
deal, and I will explain it again after, because I think the more times we talk about it for the next couple of weeks, the better off we are, because it gives the residents an opportunity to hear a little bit more about what we're doing, thinking. And I get feedback, believe it or not, after some of these meetings, they call me and, give me feedback too. So it's nice to let people know kind of where we are.
Gotcha.
I'm not asking for any motions, but would like direction. So this piece of property, and I know we have a piece of property on the warrant for annual town meeting for recreation fields. But the fire building committee has been looking for land. The property next to the existing highway barn fire station, which they had hoped to expand on, the owner did not wish to sell the river property. The house that had a fire, and they are rebuilding, so that site is pretty much off the table. We found a site that we actually believe that we would be able to purchase at a very low price, be able to cut a portion off, and then put it back on the market to regain some of our funding. So I have spoken with the owners. We're working on a purchase and sales at the direction of the board. So what I have on here is to purchase a piece of property on Masonic Home Road for $150,000 for general municipal purposes. Just want to put that out and make sure that this warrant article, the way I've got the motion, is acceptable to the board.
It is to me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments on it? I think I'll say it is a great piece of land. We walked it, it's actually contiguous to the land where the police station is. So those could, in through the back, could actually be connected between the two stations. There's a lot of great reasons why this piece would work well. And I just want to be clear that the committee is the Fire Station Building Committee, not the Fire Building Committee.
Mr. Chair?
I think Chief was getting a little worried about that one. Mr. Salou?
Just to thank all the people on that committee for trying to track this stuff down and chase this stuff down and make our town a better place.
Yeah, I
and
think
safer.
now, the committee has, which I serve on, has been very loose, and it's mostly been informal communication as opposed to formal meetings, but with this, if this goes forward, which we really hope it will, then I think that's the impetus for us to step up and really start working, so,
Yep.
yeah. Okay.
Those were the main things that I just needed to
Terrific. Then
let you
we
know
will,
before I go.
without any objections from any of the members of the board, we'll pick this up again at our workshop meeting next week. Ms. Crave, next up, we have our town administrator report. Do we have any committee reports or policy reports that
Chair?
we want to go over? Mr. Singer?
Just noticed that highway negotiations have begun and are now underway.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work in serving on that. Ms. Craver, we have the town administrator's report.
Oh, no wonder. I'm scrolling down. Yes. Okay. As the board's, at the board's last meeting, you were asked by the Dartmouth Select Board to support modification to state tax classification. The Board of Assessors had recommended not to support it at this time. We were requested to ask the Board of Assessors for clarification as to why they did not support it. Mrs. Ciccarini responded and stated that the Board of Assessors doesn't think it's fair to have the taxpayers supporting and paying for more exemptions. She states whenever you have an exemption, when you exempt a certain class from paying their fair share of taxes, another class must pay for it. In addition, for Charlton, we don't have a split tax rate, and she feels that this is the type of program that only is necessary for cities and towns that vote to have a commercial rate as well as a residential rate. Petroleum contamination migration, our LSP, Ryan Gold from CMG Environmental, collected a drinking water sample from the Carmelite Sisters of the Eucharist residents at 188 Old Worcester Road. He reports that the VOC analysis of the main and duplicate samples identified MTBE at a concentration levels that is almost double the previous results from November. Furthermore, they identified tame in both the April 2014 samples. Tame has been previously identified in the duplicate sample we collected back in September of 2011. This report is in your office. CMG believes that this constitutes ample evidence that the drinking water impacts at 188 Old Worcester Road are attributable to the Formula Mountain service station, and thus the responsibility for treatment and monitoring should fall to ExxonMobil. CMG is preparing a letter to DEP asserting this. Recodification of the bylaws. We have completed the review of the bylaws and have sent them to the departments for review. This has been a good project and will allow the residents and businesses to easily find information. I'd like to thank the department heads who reviewed the segments and added to suggestions, including Chief Purvier, Kurt Meskis, Alan Gordon, and Debbie Ciccarini. I know this is a project my staff has wanted to complete, and also to that end, I want to thank Mary for her work on this.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for the town administrator? Do you have any other business to come before the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Walker?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to just read a statement as I leave. This is my last meeting. I want to thank everybody who voted for me during the last 12 years, and to the many volunteers on the committees that I've worked on, and to the extraordinarily hardworking employees of this town. I've been greatly honored with the trust that you've placed in me, especially as my views and principles are somewhat outside the prevailing attitudes in this town at times. You've been very kind to me, and I've never felt unappreciated. I've gotten many phone calls, cards, and emails in response to my leaving, and it's been tremendously gratifying. I'd like to encourage more people to run for office. The Board of Selectmen, each one of us currently receive a stipend of just under $2,000 a year. People often say, I couldn't do that job, it would take up too much time. Well, there are about 24 regular meetings, but they only usually last about an hour and a half. This is an exception. There are workshops and town functions and parades to go to, and they're usually interesting and fun, and you get to know an awful lot of really lovely people. The calls and emails for help are actually few and far between, maybe a few a month, and they're not hard to help resolve. And you always come away with a good feeling when you're able to help somebody out. So it's really worth the effort, any effort that you put into it. As a selectman, you get a lot of emails and you have a lot of arguments with the rest of the board. But sometimes you win a few, and that makes it worth it too. I always know, and I truly believe, that every board member is looking out for the best interest of the town's people. So I just want to end by saying thank you to the residents. It's been a pleasure, really.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Mr. Salou?
Mr. Chair, on that note, it's been a great honor to serve this town in this capacity. It's been a great learning process for myself, and again, working with all the people in the town, all the departments that we work with, we have some fantastic people that work here and that do great things. So a lot of employees and a lot of people that aren't employees that do a lot of things for this town, that volunteer their time to help out. Those are the people I really want to thank. You know, the unsung heroes from our town that just do things tirelessly, never get thanked. I was glad to see that we thank the Explorers. That group of kids has done some great things. You know, carrying the flags at the baseball, at Red Sox games and Celtics games. They do a lot more things than we even really realize they do here. Again, I'd just like to thank all the people in town. I love this town more than anything in the world, and I'm going to continue to help to serve and make it a better place for all of us to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of the board, I just want to thank both of you for your service to the town. Ms. Walker, your retiring makes me the senior member of this board, which in and of itself is a pretty scary thought. The 8 years we've served together, I can't think of one meeting that was boring.
That's for sure.
So on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your service to the town and wish you well. I expect we'll be seeing both of you still around town pretty often, so
You know.
thank you both for your service.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer.
I would simply add to that, thank you for all the other things they do for this town, and as I understand, are going to continue to do and be involved in helping this community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Singer?
Mr. Chair, I was distracted.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I move that we enter into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Number 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. And number 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
We We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We'll go by roll call vote. We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Ms. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Salute?
Aye.
Mr. Singer?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the chair declares that a public meeting would have a negative effect, a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. We will come out of executive session solely for the purpose of adjournment. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Again, just a reminder, we have our annual town election this Saturday, May 3rd. Our next regular selectmen's meeting is Tuesday, May 13th, and our annual town meeting is Monday, May 19th. Thank you all and good night.